Southwest University of Science and Technology. It was the first day of school. At the school gate with its upturned eaves, a sea of students and parents crowded. Carrying various daily necessities in large bags and bundles, they entered the school in succession. Amid the crowd, a graceful figure stood out especially. Her jet black hair cascaded down to her waist, a dress outlining her youthful figure. Her fair skin seemed to glow under the sunlight. She held up her phone facing the camera, smiled, and said, "Hello, dear viewers. I am Zhao Lulu. I believe many of you are curious about how the students of Southwest University of Science and Technology spent their holidays. So today I will turn the camera toward my classmates. Please stay tuned." Zhao Lulu was a sophomore at Southwest University of Science and Technology. With her youthful appearance, lively personality, and beautiful face, she became the dream goddess of most male students as soon as she entered the university. With her outstanding looks and impressive academic credentials, Zhao Lulu thrived in the live streaming industry, even earning the label of Scholar Goddess. As soon as she started the stream, tens of thousands of viewers were watching. "Hello, classmate." Zhao Lulu quickly spotted a dark-skinned male student and began her interview. "May I ask what you did during this long holiday?" The male student, irritated by the scorching sun, initially intended to ignore her. But when he saw Zhao Lulu's fair face, he paused mid-step. His body stiffened and his expression turned unnatural. "Are you Zhao Lulu? I've seen you on the school forum. I didn't expect to be so famous." Zhao Lulu smiled sweetly and continued, "So can you tell me what you did this summer?" "I didn't do much. Just previewed the courses for the second half of the year, helped my parents with cleaning, and tutored my younger sister." Oh, Zhao Lulu nodded approvingly. "Then your summer vacation was quite meaningful. It's nothing, just what a college student ought to do." The male student looked earnest and sincere. This classmate is obviously a top student. Previewing courses. Is that even a thing in university? Haha, with classmates like him taking care of the country, we office workers can rest easy. Who are you pretending to be? Previewing courses. Who was the one spending nights at the internet cafe with me? Who was the 021 Yasuo? Your sister was just born, tutoring a baby. You can't speak properly in front of the campus beauty, can you? Your dorm buddies are watching you. Come back and clean up." Haha, looks like he's been exposed by his classmates. Zhao Lulu was very popular. In the live room there were also many classmates who admired her. Seeing their roommate putting on such a show, they ruthlessly exposed him. The exposed student, unable to see the comments, continued to show off in front of the camera before leaving contentedly, unaware that he had been labeled a clown by the audience. It seems this classmate is quite good at making up stories. Looking at the barrage, Zhao Lulu smoothed things over. Then she interviewed 2 or 3 more students. But without exception, these students either stammered or told blatant lies when they saw Zhao Lulu. There was no helping it. Young boys in springtime couldn't help but want to show off when meeting a girl of outstanding beauty. But summer vacation was too boring. They couldn't exactly say they'd been lying in bed for 2 months. Boring. I thought the students would have a rich summer. I'm dying of laughter. If Lulu hadn't interrupted, the last student would probably have bragged about flying a plane this summer. Boring, boring. Lulu, why don't you take us to see the girls' dormitory? I've never seen a girls' dorm in my life. Let's call it a day. Watching the comments, Zhao Lulu felt conflicted. She didn't know how to create exciting content. She usually just shared her daily life. Just as she hesitated whether to temporarily end the stream, suddenly a figure rushing toward the teaching building caught her eye. The person wore a loose t-shirt and black trousers with a pair of sneakers. Very simple attire. Slightly long hair, tall figure. He carried books under his arm, a sling bag across his shoulder, and an oversized water bottle hanging from the bag. A handsome guy. Although she hadn't seen his full face, just his profile made Zhao Lulu's eyes light up. As everyone knows, this is a world that values looks. Almost instinctively, Zhao Lulu hurried over and greeted, "Hello, classmate. I'm doing a live stream. May I have an interview?" The boy stopped and sized her up, then slowly nodded, "Sure." "Great." Zhao Lulu beamed and handed him the microphone. "So what did you do during this holiday?" "Worked to save up tuition." What exactly did you do?" "Forged iron, twisted rebar, assembled products, that sort of thing." The boy answered quickly and concisely. Zhao Lulu nodded, understanding. It sounded like he'd worked at a construction site. A hard-working student saving for tuition, how inspiring. This would definitely resonate with the viewers. Thinking so, Zhao Lulu prepared to continue the interview. Seeing the books he carried, Zhao Lulu asked curiously, "It seems you're a student who loves learning. Can I see what books you usually read?" Without a word, the boy opened his books. International Criminal Law Cases. Overview of International Situation. Complete Guide to Weapon Modification, War and Trade. This guy's interests are quite eclectic. Few college students like reading these books. I can understand broad interests, but doesn't it feel a bit odd? I recognize each book, but together. This guy isn't a gun runner, is he? Probably just broad interests. The live room audience buzzed with discussion. Looking at the titles, Zhao Lulu's eyes also showed a hint of strangeness. She even began to doubt his identity. Just as she was about to ask further, the boy suddenly put away the books. "I'm going to be late." With that, he quickly left under Zhao Lulu's gaze. "That classmate is a bit special," Zhao Lulu said, scratching her head awkwardly. "Lulu, you're overthinking it. College life is boring, developing some hobbies is normal. Maybe he's just a military enthusiast who likes studying international affairs and law. Every university has such odd people. The guy probably went to class. We can interview him again when we meet him." The live room audience consoled her while remaining curious about the boy. Watching the barrage, Zhao Lulu nodded. Since they were all on the same campus, maybe they'd run into him again. This could be the content for the next stream. At this thought, Zhao Lulu felt much lighter. Just as she prepared to interview other students, suddenly, wailing sirens. An urgent alarm blared. Zhao Lulu instinctively turned her head. She saw several police cars stop neatly at the school gate. On the wide body of the cars were clearly marked the word SWAT. SWAT officers rushed out, all wearing bulletproof vests and carrying loaded rifles. The sudden situation scared the surrounding students into clearing a path immediately. "Damn, so many SWAT officers, what's happening? Did someone die on campus? So many armed SWAT, did terrorists sneak into the school? Lulu, stay safe. Geez, it's the first day of school. Dozens of SWAT officers in bulletproof vests were no small matter." Zhao Lulu realized that using this as live stream material would skyrocket her popularity. She quickly and discreetly moved closer. Dozens of SWAT officers quickly formed a square at the gate. The lead officer strode to the front and looked at the trembling gatekeeper, his expression stern. "SWAT on a mission to arrest a suspect." "Arrest? Who? There are only students here," the gatekeeper whispered. The SWAT officer nodded solemnly. "The target is a college student." "Arrest a student." Hearing these words, the security guard was stunned. Before he could react, the SWAT officer in front of him pulled out his badge and held it up. "SWAT business. Please cooperate." "Oh. Okay." The guard finally snapped out of it. "Open the school gate to its fullest. Go." The leading SWAT officer put away his badge, waved his hand. Dozens of SWAT officers raised their guns, immediately assuming combat stances, and rushed into the campus in an orderly and swift manner. Students on campus quickly made way, staring at this bizarre scene in astonishment. They couldn't imagine what kind of heinous criminal would warrant such a massive operation by the law enforcement agency. Oh my god, a criminal actually got into the campus. Judging by the scale, the charges must be serious. Didn't you hear the SWAT officer say the target is a student? Are students these days that tough? Back in my day, college students just slept and played games. Being admitted to Southwest University of Science and Technology means they are all top students. High intelligence crime. No wonder it caused such a stir. Streamer, hurry up and follow them. This is a once-in-a-lifetime scoop. Streamer, if you follow them, I'll send a carnival. The live chat was scrolling frantically. Zhao Lulu was also torn. The SWAT officers carrying out the arrest were all fully armed. This meant the operation was extremely dangerous. But if she could capture the scene firsthand, the live stream's popularity would probably multiply several times. If I just film from a distance, it should be fine, Zhao Lulu thought to herself. Urged on by netizens, she quickly followed. Elsewhere, Feng, carrying a messenger bag and a thick stack of books, entered the classroom just before the bell. Just made it on time. Seeing his classmates still settling down, Feng sighed in relief. If he was late on the first day of school, he would definitely be remembered by the teacher. Then for the rest of the year, life would be tough. Although Feng wasn't afraid of teachers, He had already self-studied all the college courses. But he was someone who hated trouble. Thinking this, Feng found an inconspicuous spot in the classroom and sat down. "Hey Feng go." The boy with a crew-cut and tan skin in the front row turned around and greeted enthusiastically. "What did you do this summer? Couldn't get in touch with you at all." "Work study," Feng replied while placing the books on the desk. "Work study. Looks like you earned a lot. What did you do? Take me along during winter break." "It's okay." Feng nodded and repeated his previous answer. "Just things like forging, iron twisting, rebar assembling products." "You worked at a construction site." The dark-skinned boy was surprised, obviously not expecting Feng to work at a construction site. After all, Southwest University of Science and Technology was a prestigious university in China. Wouldn't it be better to tutor for 200 or 300 an hour? Why go to a construction site? The dark-skinned boy couldn't understand. Just as he was about to ask more, the homeroom teacher walked in. "Long time no see, everyone." It was supposed to be a class, but actually it was a class meeting. The purpose was to let classmates share their summer experiences and prepare for future class work. "I'm sure you all had a fulfilling summer. There's not much to teach today. How about we share what you did this summer?" the homeroom teacher said, scanning the classroom. His gaze quickly fell on Feng. In his impression, Feng was an excellent student with good conduct. He spoke little but always hit the point when answering questions. His grades were among the best. And he had heard Feng earned his tuition through summer jobs. This is perfect for setting an example for the class, the homeroom teacher thought, intending to have Feng share his summer experience. But before he could speak, suddenly, bang! A loud crash. Everyone in the class, including the teacher, was startled. The sound of heavy, dense footsteps approached. Then everyone saw several SWAT officers with riot shields rush into the classroom. "Nobody move. Sit back in your seats, hands on the table." A sharp order rang out. The SWAT officers with riot shields lined up, followed by dozens more SWAT officers carrying pistols or rifles rushing in through the door. The originally spacious lecture hall suddenly became crowded. This sudden scene left the students dumbfounded. What the hell? What's going on? Where did all these SWAT officers come from? And they're carrying guns. Guns! Panic erupted among everyone. Are you kidding? Making noise at a time like this? Want to get shot? Looking at the scene, the homeroom teacher was also stunned, completely unable to process what was happening. But he instinctively tried to calm the students. "Everyone stay still, cooperate with the SWAT officers." The leading SWAT officer stood on the podium, scanning the room. He pointed a finger at a corner. The next second, dozens of SWAT officers moved in unison, quickly surrounding the young man in the corner. "You are Feng, right? We're from the Sanxian Law Enforcement Agency. You need to come with us now. Don't resist. Let me see your hands." Glancing at the SWAT officers encircling him, Feng's expression was calm, without any panic. "Okay." Under the bewildered stares of his classmates, Feng, surrounded by SWAT officers, walked out of the classroom. The classroom immediately erupted. What the heck? Feng was arrested. What crime did Feng commit to have so many SWAT officers come for him? Dozens of SWAT officers, all with real guns. This is like treatment for a terrorist. Did Feng kill someone during the summer? Bullshit. How could Feng kill anyone? But the classroom became a noisy mess. Silence. The homeroom teacher sternly commanded the others to stop talking. He then quickly walked out. "Comrade." He approached the SWAT officer who gave the order, asking worriedly, "I'm the homeroom teacher for this class. Can you tell us what happened?" Feng is a good kid. He wouldn't commit a crime. Are you sure you have the right person?" The officer glanced at him, hesitated, and then comforted. "We just need to ask him some questions. Don't be nervous." The homeroom teacher froze, then glanced at the matte-finish Type 95 rifle on the officer's chest. He thought, with so many SWAT officers and guns, it's really hard not to be nervous. Meanwhile, Zhao Lulu hid in a corner, constantly adjusting her phone's focus. In the frame, a figure surrounded by dozens of SWAT officers walked out of the classroom. This is... Zhao Lulu felt more and more familiar, then suddenly widened her eyes. That's the guy from earlier. Immediately the live stream exploded. That guy is the one the SWAT officers came to arrest. But he looks about my age. With such a big setup. What did he do? The enforcement department. Inside the interrogation room surrounded by 4 walls. Extremely dim. Feng was seated on a small stool. Across from him were 2 police officers in charge of the interrogation. Feng right. A stern-faced officer in his 40s or 50s began. Let me remind you, since we brought you here, it means we've already investigated what you've done. Every word you say from now on will be recorded. Don't lie or we can deem you as resisting law enforcement. Do you understand? Yes. Feng replied calmly. Good. The middle-aged officer breathed a sigh of relief, but soon his eased mind tensed up again. Damn it. He almost forgot the seemingly naive college student before him was actually an arms dealer. Looking at the file where every single charge carried a minimum of 3 years, the middle-aged officer couldn't help but click his tongue. What was he doing at this age? Eating, sleeping, dating. Occasionally when he had time he'd hang out at internet cafes playing games. If anything, it was the daily training of a police academy student. But how could these things compare to the other party? Otherwise they wouldn't have dispatched dozens of SWAT officers to arrest him at Southwest University of Science and Technology. Dozens of SWAT officers. That was the treatment reserved for terrorists. Thinking of this, the middle-aged officer's mouth twitched. Composing himself, he began the questioning. What did you do during this holiday? I worked part-time at my uncle's agricultural machinery factory. Hearing this answer, the middle-aged officer's face darkened and his hand gripping the pen involuntarily tightened. Damn it. You call that working part-time? Besides, could the things you made actually be produced by an agricultural machinery factory? Cooperate properly and tell the truth. I am telling the truth. The middle-aged officer nearly spat out blood. Good grief. He had seen stubborn people but never one this stubborn. Even in the police station he still refused to tell the truth. The middle-aged officer grew angry. But then he thought again. The other party's presence here was merely a formality. He immediately lost the desire to argue. If you say it's working part-time, then it's working part-time. Tell me about the part-time work content. Providing product modifications, after-sales service and some value-added services for clients. Feng followed smoothly. But hearing this answer made the middle-aged officer's mouth twitch again. Sounding quite professional. Then explain this. He picked up the file on the table and read word by word. The theory and lathe operation of modifying gas tanks into mortars, methods for improving the accuracy of pipe-cut rocket launchers, plans for modifying tractors into universal track tanks. What's all this about? The middle-aged officer put down the file and stared intently at Feng. Do you know that your actions have violated the law? The middle-aged officer's expression was grave. Though he didn't know how the other party had accomplished these tasks in an agricultural machinery factory. But any single one of these charges carried a sentence of 3 to 10 years. With so many combined, it could even lead to life imprisonment. The middle-aged officer didn't believe that faced with these facts the other party could still have the audacity to argue. But to his surprise, confronting his questioning, Feng across from him still showed no change in expression. He calmly said, I took some time during the summer break to get a lawyer's license specializing in international law, the laws of war, espionage law, smuggling law, arms trafficking law. May I ask which specific law I violated? The middle-aged officer. Faced with Feng's question, the middle-aged officer fell into thought. Was this really just a college student? He was way too composed. Even an ordinary criminal college student, when faced with the facts laid before them, wouldn't they break down crying, claiming they were forced or something, begging for leniency? Why was the other party instead questioning him? The middle-aged officer couldn't help but sink into contemplation. After a long while he began to doubt life itself. Come to think of it, none of the things Feng did matched any of the laws he mentioned. If you say he manufactured and sold arms, he did make and sell them. But he sold them under the guise of agricultural tools. He only performed basic modifications. The parts that truly turned the tools into weapons were written in a manual called the Forbidden Handbook. For example, the gas tanks. Feng only handled cutting and mold making. Calling it arms trafficking was indeed a stretch. As for other things like international law or espionage law, that was even more absurd. For a moment the middle-aged officer began to doubt himself. Had he arrested the wrong person? Just then the tightly shut door of the interrogation room suddenly opened from the outside. A middle-aged man in military uniform walked in. "How's the questioning going?" "This kid is quite unusual." The middle-aged officer shook his head and replied vaguely, "Oh." Hearing this, the military man paused, looking at Feng on the small stool with interest. Seeing the other party's youthful, even naive face, even though he had reviewed the other's file countless times, he couldn't help but marvel inwardly. So young. It was hard to imagine that those agricultural tools that could be classified as weapons were all the work of this college student before him. In any other scenario he would have definitely asked how the other party managed it. But this time, he came with a mission. Calming the turmoil in his heart, he said, "Let me ask you a question." The military man walked up to Feng and spoke seriously. "I hear your agricultural machinery factory offers modification services. Can you modify a retired J-10 fighter jet?" At those words the middle-aged officer beside him was stunned. What the hell? Modify a J-10? He had read Feng's record. Although Feng could turn agricultural tools into weapons, a tractor and a J-10 were completely different. Even a retired J-10 was an extremely precious asset. The metal could be recycled. Special parts could be sealed and modified. The remaining components could be exported and many countries would compete for them on the international market. But what had they just said? Modify a J-10. And the tone between the two sounded like they were doing business. Damn it, am I going crazy or is the world going crazy? The middle-aged officer instinctively looked at Feng to see how he would answer. Hearing the military man's question, Feng was also visibly taken aback. After a moment's thought he nodded. Yes, for a 6th-generation Skyward version, but it's very expensive. Are you sure you want to modify it? Feng answered honestly. The entire interrogation room instantly fell into dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared at Feng in utter disbelief. You could actually modify a J-10. At Feng's reply, the entire interrogation room fell into a deathly silence. After an unknown amount of time, the others finally came to their senses. All right then. The soldier nodded, then looked at the middle-aged policeman whose mouth hadn't even had time to close. Then I'll take him away now. Ah. Sure, no problem. The middle-aged policeman nodded, stepped forward to unlock Feng from the small stool and watched the two leave with a peculiar expression. Leaving the enforcement bureau, Feng followed the soldier into an olive-green jeep. He asked no questions, simply sitting silently in the back seat. As the soldier drove, he occasionally glanced at Feng through the rearview mirror. Seeing Feng's still expressionless and unperturbed demeanor, he couldn't help but inwardly marvel if this was really a college student. The way he followed without asking any questions did seem rather naively foolish. But why did he always give off an air of being so sure of himself? He was far too confident. The soldier muttered to himself but made no attempt to converse with Feng. The jeep sped along the road, soon entering the suburbs and stopping in front of a factory. Please wait a moment, the soldier said to Feng after getting out, then quickly walked away. Taking this opportunity, Feng surveyed his surroundings. It was an old-fashioned factory with the hum of machinery drifting from within. Notably, soldiers were stationed around this factory. Each soldier was armed with rifles, as if the factory housed something extremely precious. An aircraft. Feng guessed inwardly. Just then several figures approached rapidly from a distance. Leading them was a solemn, dignified middle-aged man who appeared to be in his 40s or 50s. He too wore a military uniform, looking much like the soldier who had escorted Feng. The only difference was the rank insignia on his shoulder, a single bear star. Feng was taken aback. A single bear star, also known as a gold leaf with one star, signified the other's status in the military district as a major general. Comrade Xiao Lu. The major general walked over, greeting him with a smile. Let me introduce myself. Im Chun Yiming. The reason I called you here is that the military has taken an interest in your mechanical modification abilities. Consider this a business cooperation, so don't be nervous. All right. Feng nodded. Although the other was a major general, he hadn't done anything wrong, so there was no need to panic. After a brief greeting, Chen Yiming said no more. He nodded to the station soldiers and led Feng directly inside. Upon entering the factory, Feng saw several 5-man squads of soldiers in combat gear, fully armed. They patrolled the factory in a spider web pattern. The level of security far exceeded that outside. Seeing this, Feng understood. This must be the factory housing the decommissioned fighter jets. Arriving at a massive warehouse the moment he stepped inside, Feng saw a colossal object stored within. With its blue-gray coating and streamlined design combined with the serial number printed on the tail and the dense battle scars, Feng quickly recognized it as a decommissioned J-10 fighter jet. Comrade Xiao Lu. At that moment Chen Yiming spoke, pointing to the fighter jet beside him. If I asked you to modify this decommissioned fighter jet, could you do it? Hearing his words, Feng didn't answer immediately. Instead, he first surveyed the fighter jet before him. Then, with a thought, a panel rapidly unfolded before him. Tractor modification to Universal Track Tank Plan, redeemed steel pipe cutting rocket launcher precision improvement plan, redeemed gas tank modification to mortar principle and lathe practical operation, redeemed. On the pale blue panel, numerous modification plans that Feng had either redeemed or not were displayed. This system of his also had a very simple and understandable name: Divine Modification System. Within the system's panel, Feng could find modification plans for anything. By redeeming a plan, he would gain the corresponding principles and techniques. Comparing it to the J-10 fighter jet before him, Feng quickly scrolled through the panel. Soon a plan appeared before his eyes. J-10 modification to 6th generation Skyward Fighter Plan, 100,000,000 points. Note: redeeming this plan will grant you the modification blueprints and all the necessary techniques. During the previous summer break, Feng had helped at his uncle's agricultural machinery factory, modifying and selling quite a few items. For every product modified using the system's blueprints that he sold, Feng earned points equivalent to the monetary amount. These points could then be used to redeem various modification techniques from the system's shop. His system now held over 100 million points. Redeeming the J-10 modification blueprints was more than feasible. Having decided, Feng closed the panel and looked up at Chen Yiming. It can be modified. Then, with some confusion, he asked, "Did you send dozens of special police to arrest me just for this?" Hearing this, Chen Yiming also looked somewhat embarrassed. He explained apologetically, "Hey Race, the thing, our military department discovered that a private company had been secretly modifying quite a few items, and those items were to some extent already considered military weapons. So I asked the police to bring that person in. I just didn't expect the police to misunderstand and think we'd found a criminal, so." Feng. Listening to his words, Feng fell silent. Composing himself, he looked at Chen Yiming. Modifying the J-10 into a 6th generation Skyward fighter will take about 15 to 20 days with a budget of 10 million. No problem. Chen Yiming nodded. I'll give you a month. The 10 million modification fee and all the necessary materials will be covered on my end. There's just one request. Chen Yiming paused, then continued, "Try to make it look as real as possible." Feng was bewildered. What did he mean by make it look as real as possible? Before he could ask, Chen Yiming pulled out a business card and handed it to Feng. "If you need anything, just call this number." "All right." Feng nodded and carefully put it away. Leaving the factory and learning that Feng had classes in the afternoon, Chen Yiming said no more and drove him back to school. Tisk tisk, I wonder what crime that kid committed to have dozens of special police come for him. At the gate of Southwest University of Science and Technology. Inside the security booth, the guard recalled the thrilling scene from the morning, leaning back in his chair with a look of wonder. In his decades as a guard, he had never seen a student arrested by special police on the first day of school. Remembering the plain-looking youth surrounded by dozens of special police, the guard sighed inwardly. What a shame. Just as he was thinking, an olive green Jeep stopped at the school gate. "What do you think you're doing?" The guard rolled down his window and shouted, "No parking at the school gate. Move it along." As soon as he finished, the car door opened. From the driver's seat stepped a middle-aged man in military uniform. Holy crap! A big shot. Seeing the rank insignia on the man's shoulder, the guard immediately realized his high status. He pulled out his phone to make a call. But just then a young man got out from the passenger seat. Staring at the familiar face, the guard froze for a moment, then his eyes widened. Holy crap! Wasn't this the student who was arrested by the special police this morning? How was he back in the afternoon? And escorted by a military vehicle. Taken away by dozens of SWAT officers in the morning, he was sent back in the afternoon, personally driven by a major general. At this moment, not to mention the security guards. Had he not experienced it himself, Feng would never have believed such a rumor. So as he passed through the school gate, sensing the peculiar gaze from the elderly security guard beside him, Feng didn't bother to explain. He strode directly through the gate and headed toward the teaching building. He had left in such a hurry earlier that his water bottle backpack and a large stack of books were still in the classroom. He wondered which class was using that room now. Hoping not to disturb anyone, Feng entered the teaching building. Just then a fragrant breeze rushed toward him. Feng looked up and felt a flicker of recognition. She seemed familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. Oh. He remembered. Wasn't this the girl who had interviewed him at the school gate this morning? Classmate Feng. Zhao Lulu was also startled to see him again. She gave him a strange look and hesitated before asking, "Weren't you taken away by the SWAT officers? How did you come back?" "You didn't escape from prison, did you?" "No." Feng's mouth twitched. He blamed the middle-aged police officer who had brought a crowd to arrest him without clarifying the matter. By now the entire campus probably knew that a junior had been dragged away by dozens of SWAT officers on the first day of school. Feng found it hard to explain. After all, the real cause of this incident involved the military. Not to mention the potential impact of spreading it recklessly out of professional ethics. Feng could never divulge client information. It was just a misunderstanding. Once it was cleared up, I came back. I see. Zhao Lulu reluctantly accepted this explanation. After a moment's thought, she said, "Classmate Feng, the morning interview ended too abruptly. There were so many things I didn't get to ask. Do you have time now to continue the interview?" As she spoke, she turned her phone around. The screen was densely packed with bullet comments. "Wow, isn't that the guy who was taken away this morning? How is he back? A misunderstanding. The police sent dozens of SWAT officers. How could it be a misunderstanding? He didn't really escape from prison, did he? Do you think this is a movie? Escape from prison. Do you think humans can outrun bullets? With dozens of SWAT officers guarding, even a gorilla would get a slap. I'm really curious about what this guy went through at the Enforcement Bureau. Lulu, hurry up and interview him." Scanning the barrage, Feng felt speechless. "Some other time. I have things to do." Shaking his head, Feng didn't linger. He bypassed Zhao Lulu and strode toward the classroom, leaving her standing there in bewilderment. Haha, the same excuse again. The streamer got rejected. Wow, this classmate seems really mysterious. Streamer, dig deeper, there's definitely some juicy scoop. Maybe he made a confidentiality agreement with the police. Are you trying to get the streamer thrown in jail? What's there to fear? If things go wrong, just turn around and leave. Say you don't know anything. I feel like there's something big here. Streamer, you've got to seize this opportunity. Watching the comments, Zhao Lulu furrowed her delicate brows. Indeed, though she had only spoken with Feng twice, she could clearly sense something unusual about him. Maybe he'll ask him again after school. Zhao Lulu thought. After all, she had no ill intentions. If caught, she could just claim ignorance. Meanwhile, Feng arrived at the classroom door. He knocked. "Report. Come in." The homeroom teacher, who was in the middle of a lesson, turned to see a familiar figure enter. "Feng. How are you back?" The teacher was astonished. At the same time, all eyes in the classroom fixed on Feng. "Damn, Feng, how are you back? I thought you were locked up. Did you escape from prison? Good to have you back. What did you do to get dozens of SWAT officers after you?" Facing dozens of SWAT officers without flinching, "Feng, you're amazing." Everyone buzzed with curiosity, staring at Feng. Faced with the concern of his classmates and teacher, Feng didn't say much. He simply told them it was a misunderstanding. The teacher also knew that matters involving the Enforcement Bureau were not to be discussed openly. So she quickly regained control of the class and continued the lecture. However, after this incident, most students couldn't focus. Finally, when school ended, just as everyone planned to ask Feng for the full story, they found he had already left. Meanwhile, Feng had arrived at the warehouse housing the J-10. The 10 million in funding had already been deposited, and his system now held 10 million in points. He immediately redeemed the J-10 Extreme modification to 6th generation Skyward Fighter plan. Upon completion, the relevant principles and technical knowledge flooded into Feng's mind. "I still need some materials." Thinking this, Feng pulled out the business card Chen Yiming had given him. It was a plain white card with only a name and a phone number. Very concise. Feng dialed the number and briefly listed the materials he needed. "Hold on, I'll arrange it immediately." The call ended. Soon military trucks pulled up to the warehouse entrance delivering a large batch of materials. All preparations are complete. I can start the modification. Lu Feng thought, gazing at the fighter jet before him. A fighter's primary function is to engage in aerial combat. The most critical factor affecting its efficiency is undoubtedly the takeoff method. Staring at the battle-scarred J-10, Lu Feng fell into thought. The current J-10 required an extremely long runway for takeoff. Such a takeoff method was very time-consuming. But since it was an extreme modification, he needed to do something different. With that in mind, relevant principles of the 6th-generation Skyward fighter flashed through his mind. In the end, he found the most suitable option in the data vertical takeoff. If this method could be achieved, the time saved would be substantial. On the battlefield, situations change in an instant. Every second wasted could drastically alter the course of combat. Thus, the importance of this modification was self-evident. Moreover, to ensure the fighter could evade radar detection, Lu Feng made significant changes to the airframe's integrity. A smoother, more streamlined exterior could better evade radar. For the crucial wings, Lu Feng opted for hidden split wings. As for the engine, a core component, he chose a small nuclear fission reactor. This saved energy while allowing the fighter to engage in prolonged high-altitude combat. With the modification direction set, Lu Feng got to work without hesitation. The process took over half a month. Each time he entered the factory, he had to endure questioning from the guards. Eventually, he contacted Chen Yiming and obtained a work badge. During the day, he attended classes. At night, he came to the factory to modify the J-10. Supported by the principles and techniques redeemed from the system, the tedious tasks of disassembly and modification proceeded in an orderly fashion in his hands. If an aviation expert were present, they would marvel that this young man, seemingly in his early 20s, had a deeper understanding of the fighter than the veteran expert who had studied it for decades. To give an example, Lu Feng's knowledge of the J-10 now matched or even surpassed that of its inventor. With such technical support, the progress of modifying the J-10 into a 6th-generation Skyward fighter advanced daily. Over half a month passed. Looking at the fighter, which was mostly modified, Lu Feng nodded in satisfaction. He then opened Chen Yiming's contact and sent a picture of the strikingly exaggerated fighter, along with a message: "It'll be finished soon." Meanwhile, in his office, Chen Yiming, who had just finished work, saw the image Lu Feng sent. This. Staring at the fighter in the image, Chen Yiming's eyes widened. To be honest, he had never seen such an exaggeratedly designed fighter. Traditional fighters were assembled from a main body, wings, and various components, all produced by different departments. But what Lu Feng sent? From the photo, the fighter's main body and wings seemed to be a single integrated piece. There were no obvious assembly marks at any joints. It could be seen as a complete whole. Its highly streamlined design looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. To be honest, in all his years in the military, Chen Yiming had never seen such a beautifully designed fighter. It's a shame this isn't a real 6th-generation jet. Thinking this, Chen Yiming's eyes filled with regret. His real purpose in hiring Lu Feng to modify the J-10 wasn't to revive this retired fighter. Rather, it was to create a diversion at the airshow in a dozen days, thereby concealing the true fighter jet being developed by the Rabbit. Looking at the image Lu Feng sent, Chen Yiming nodded with satisfaction. Though it's not a real 6th-generation fighter from its highly deceptive appearance, hiring Lu Feng for the modification was a very wise decision. Time like water in a toilet bowl flowed hastily by. Soon, the day before the airshow arrived. The Southern Theater Command of the Dragon Nation. On the wall of a military-industrial building, a freshly printed promotional poster was plastered. "Not bad, you really have some skills." Wang Lian, the head of the logistics department, gazed at the poster on the wall, clicking his tongue in admiration. "To be honest, look at this exterior, it's quite authentic. Not only does it reference aerodynamics, but it even draws from sci-fi movie fighter jet models. Most importantly, it's the level of detail on this fighter. Good heavens, if I didn't know the truth, I'd really think our nation had made another breakthrough in fighter jet technology." He praised it for quite a while. Only when his throat felt parched did Wang Lian pick up his large tea mug and take a sip. As for Chen Yiming's plan, Wang Lian was naturally well aware of it. After all, the hefty refit fee of 10 million had been approved through his hands. To understand more, he had even asked Chen Yiming for the information on the person responsible for modifying the J-10. A college student working part-time at an agricultural machinery factory who had repeatedly helped foreign forces convert farm tools into weapons. This string of credentials left Wang Lian utterly dumbfounded. He simply couldn't fathom how the identities of a college student and a part-timer could be linked to an arms dealer. But for the sake of the airshow and under Chen Yiming's constant reassurances, Wang Lian gritted his teeth and approved the funding application. Yet now it seemed, although the funds were a bit much, the results of this fighter jet modification were beyond words. At the very least, it was more than enough to create confusion. However, even though the goal was achieved, the doubts in Wang Lian's heart remained undiminished. He looked at Chen Yiming and asked curiously, "Yiming, are you sure this was made by that college kid working part-time at the agricultural machinery factory? Even if it's just for show, with such a high degree of completion, it hardly seems like something a college student working part-time at an agricultural machinery factory could pull off." Facing his suspicion, Chen Yiming smiled and said, "The entire refit process was carried out at the military factory in Siang province where retired fighter jets are stored. I can guarantee that apart from Lu Feng, no one else has entered that warehouse during this time." As he spoke, he looked at the promotional poster before him. His eyes were full of admiration. "Honestly, I didn't expect Lu Feng to achieve this effect either. With its current level of completion, it's definitely fine to take it out to bluff people." Wang Lian nodded, understanding in his heart. His curiosity about this college student named Lu Feng grew even stronger. "The airshow starts tomorrow. Can this fighter jet be brought out for exhibition?" "No problem." Chen Yiming assured Lu Feng finished modifying the J-10 several days ago. "He's still inspecting this decoy fighter now. There won't be any accidents." "That's good then." Seeing Chen Yiming guarantee with a pat on his chest, Wang Lian's last worry dissipated. He set down his cup, straightened his clothes and said, "Since that's the case, I'm relieved. I'll leave things here to you for now. I need to go pick someone up soon." "Pick someone up?" Chen Yiming asked with a smile, "Who's important enough to warrant a personal pickup from Director Wang?" "Of course, it's the experts coming to the airshow." Wang Lian replied, "2 national masters specializing in aeronautics are attending this airshow." National masters in aeronautics. Chen Yiming's eyes widened. With the Dragon Nation's aviation technology currently stagnant, these masters in charge of the field were taking time out to attend the airshow. It seemed the higher-ups placed great importance on this event. "Don't worry," Chen Yiming assured solemnly, "I'll handle things here. You go ahead and pick them up." "All right." Wang Lian said no more. After a brief tidy-up, he took a car to the airport. Meanwhile, aboard a private jet, 2 elderly men with graying hair, appearing in their 60s or 70s yet radiating vitality, were also focusing on the upcoming airshow. These 2 were the national masters who had set aside their research work to attend. "Relax." Li Deo turned to look at the several researchers behind him, still frowning in deep thought, and said with a smile, "Do you know why I brought you all to this airshow?" "Isn't it to find inspiration?" a researcher answered instinctively. Their research on the 6th-generation fighter jet had hit a bottleneck with no leads in sight. Having heard about the airshow in Siang province, they decided to pause their work and attend, hoping to stumble upon some inspiration. Yet most didn't truly pin their hopes on the event. After all, fighter jet research required immense technical expertise gathered together. The aircraft displayed at this airshow were all older models the Dragon Nation had possessed for a long time. Drawing inspiration from these outdated fighters seemed nearly hopeless. Hearing their answers, Li Deo nodded, then shook his head yes and no. This period of research has exhausted everyone. When people are tired, their thinking tends to stagnate. So bringing you here is also to help you relax. Work and rest should be balanced. Despite saying this, after sitting back down, Li Deo pulled out a set of blueprints from his bag and continued studying them quietly with Zhao Kongping beside him. The 2 were the director and deputy director of the Aviation Research Institute, both national masters in aerospace. Nearby, Song Guoming, the military region's political commissar, caught a glimpse of the blueprints in their hands. His eyes narrowed instantly. He couldn't understand the technical drawings, but among them was a highly detailed rendering, a fighter jet with an extraordinarily striking design. Streamlined exterior, integrated fuselage. Especially its flying posture, like a cloud swallow. Is this the 6th-generation fighter? Looking at the rendering, Song Guoming couldn't help but marvel. Though he didn't know the jet's specific capabilities, just the sight of it was impressive. If this fighter could be successfully developed, his military region might be among the first to be equipped with 6th-generation aircraft. Unfortunately, these problems aren't so easy to solve. Otherwise, these pillars of the nation wouldn't be working through the nights. Song Guoming felt a pang of regret. Soon the plane landed. As they disembarked, they saw Wang Lian, who had come specially to greet them. "Salute, Commander." Seeing Song Guoming, Wang Lian immediately saluted and signaled, "The vehicles are ready. We can return to the military region anytime." "Thank you for your hard work." Song Guoming nodded, then ushered the 2 national masters and the team of technical personnel into the cars. Soon, they returned to the Southern Theater Command. After settling, the researchers from the Institute Political Commissar Song Guoming sought out Wang Lian. How are the preparations? Rest assured, Commander, everything is in perfect order, no issues at all. With that, he led Song Guoming into the military-industrial building. Arriving before the promotional poster, Commander, take a look, this is what we've prepared over this period. To be honest, I didn't expect such a high level of completion. This isn't just for bluffing, it could probably even serve as a reference for the research institute. Wang Lian rambled on. Meanwhile, staring at the poster on the wall, Song Guoming was stunned. This poster. Why does it look so familiar? It's as if I've just seen it. Have you seen it? Hearing Song Guoming's words, Wang Lian was taken aback. That can't be. This promotional image has never been leaked. How could you have seen it? Chen Yiming quickly stepped forward as well. With a solemn expression, he assured, before today I haven't shown this image to anyone. Logically, it shouldn't have been circulated. This matter was neither trivial nor grave. After all, it was just a promotional image. It would eventually be released for publicity. But if it had indeed been leaked, it meant someone had inadvertently divulged information. In the military, such an incident was extremely serious. That was why they reacted so strongly. Song Guoming shook his head and speculated, maybe I was too tired and missaw it. Hearing this, the two finally breathed a sigh of relief. Song Guoming looked at the promotional image before him again. He scrutinized it thoroughly and finally nodded with satisfaction. I must say, this promotional image is quite well done. Just its appearance alone can meet our needs. It's a pity. If only this were a real fighter jet we truly possessed. By the way. He turned to Minister Wang and Chen Yiming. When can this fighter jet be transported to the venue? It can be done today. Chen Yiming immediately replied. I just contacted them. The military personnel have already arrived at the factory. Good. Song Guoming nodded. The airshow starts tomorrow. Make sure everything is arranged properly and nothing goes wrong. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, just as Chen Yiming had said, the military personnel had already arrived at the factory. They were preparing to transport the fighter jet modified by Feng to the airshow venue. Feng was also called in to conduct a final inspection of the fighter jet. In the warehouse, Feng climbed up and down, performing a meticulous check on the fighter jet. He finally confirmed everything was normal. If the military had sent an Air Force pilot, it could have been flown away on the spot. With that thought, he opened the warehouse door. And at the same time, the soldiers who had been waiting outside the warehouse for a long time also cast curious glances. The next moment, everyone was stunned. Each person's eyes widened as they stared at the massive dark silhouette inside the warehouse. Their jaws nearly dropped. What was going on? Hadn't the Major General said they were here to transport a model of a modified J-10 fighter jet? What was this thing? As the warehouse door opened, everyone saw a fighter jet with an extremely exaggerated shape brimming with sci-fi elements parked inside. Its silver-gray coating and highly streamlined exterior. The entire body seemed to be made as one piece without any superfluous parts. The whole fighter jet looked as if it had been crafted from alien technology in a sci-fi movie. Everyone was dumbfounded. Comrade. The soldier in charge of the transport swallowed hard and spoke hoarsely. Are you sure? This is what we're supposed to move. Was this really not the latest product from the research institute? He didn't voice that last thought, but the shock in his eyes was unmistakable. He stared intently at Feng, wanting him to confirm one last time. If they had indeed picked up the wrong item, the consequences would be severe. Seeing his stunned reaction, Feng shook his head. This is the one. No mistake. You'll have to figure out how to move it. Hearing this, the others finally relaxed, though they were still deeply shocked inside. Since he had assured them and the airshow was waiting, they couldn't waste time. So, after briefly composing themselves, the lead soldier waved his hand and everyone immediately began the transport. With the press of a button, the warehouse roof opened. A heavy crane arrived. A large cargo vehicle specially designed for transporting fighter jets also drove in. Careful. The lead soldier shouted commands, nervously watching as the others secured steel cables to the fighter jet's surface. The large crane began to operate. Soon, The sixth generation skyward was slowly lifted. The lead soldier watched the scene anxiously, fearing that a single mistake by the crane operator could cause damage. But thankfully everyone's professional skills were top-notch. With a thud, the sixth generation skyward settled steadily onto the large cargo vehicle. After another inspection, confirming that the fighter jet had suffered no damage or even scuffs during transport, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for your cooperation, comrade." The lead soldier saluted Feng. "Thank you for your contribution to this airshow." "You're welcome." Feng waved his hand. "If there are any issues with the fighter jet, feel free to contact me anytime. I provide after-sales service." "All right." After a brief exchange, the soldiers boarded the cargo vehicle and departed swiftly. Feng closed the warehouse and returned to school for classes. The distance between the warehouse and the airshow venue was not far. In just a few hours, the cargo vehicle arrived at the airshow site. The area was still under lockdown, closed to outside visitors, so the fighter jet was kept in absolute secrecy during transport. It was placed in the airshow center and covered with a black cloth. After confirming everything was fine, the soldiers finally left. And at the same time, having had a busy day, Political Commissar Song Wuming lay in bed ready to rest, but he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The promotional image he had just seen still lingered in his mind. Strange. Song Wuming frowned. The more he thought about it, the more something felt off. The fighter jet in the promotional image he had just seen was far too similar to the one in the rendering he had seen from the two esteemed scholars. It shouldn't be. Song Wuming muttered to himself. His mind churned with thoughts. The development of the sixth generation fighter jet was top secret. There was no way it could have leaked. But why did it look so similar to the one in the promotional image? To get to the bottom of it, the best course was to invite the two esteemed scholars to take a look in person. But it was too late now. The two scholars were advanced in age and exhausted from a day of flying. It wouldn't be right to disturb them. Besides, he only felt the two images were similar. Bothering them over such a trivial matter would be inappropriate. Forget it. The airshow starts tomorrow, so well, deal with it then. Time quickly passed to the next day. Today was the official opening day of the airshow. The airshow center was now open to the public. The vast exhibition square was bustling with crowds. Professionals from various related fields had gathered here. The scene was one of jubilation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host of the airshow began, drawing everyone's attention. "I believe you're all here today because you're curious about our nation's aerospace capabilities. And today we have invited two very distinguished guests in the aerospace field." With a gesture of his hand, two elderly men with graying hair but full of vitality appeared before the crowd. Let's give a warm welcome to Li Deo, Director of the Aviation Research Institute, and Zhao Kongping, Deputy Director of the Aviation Research Institute. At these words, the crowd erupted in excitement. Everyone present was well versed in the aerospace field. How could they not know of these two renowned figures? The Director and Deputy Director of the Aviation Research Institute. They were arguably the two most prominent figures in the entire nation's aerospace sector. Wow, it's Director Li. I was just reading his early papers a few days ago. I never thought I'd meet him in person so soon. I have so many questions I hope to ask Director Li and Director Zhao today. In front of these two giants, our questions seem as simple as 1 + 1. In the aerospace field, I doubt there's anyone in the whole country with greater expertise than these two. While the airshow center was buzzing with excitement, Song Wuming, who hadn't slept well all night, sought out Minister Wang again. "Minister Wang, let me see the promotional image we prepared earlier." "All right." Minister Wang didn't say much. He found the promotional image on the computer and opened it. The next moment, Song Wuming was utterly dumbfounded. Damn it. This was absolutely identical to the rendering he had seen on the plane. Song Wuming stood behind Minister Wang, his expression shifting as he stared at the promotional image on the screen. He had been uncertain before, but after a night of deliberation, seeing this image now made him almost certain. The fighter jet in this promotional image was identical to the rendering he had seen on the plane held by the two esteemed scholars. Something had gone wrong. A major disaster. The thought flashed through Song Wuming's mind and his face instantly turned grim. "Old Wang," he said. He looked at Minister Wang and asked urgently, "Where did you get this promotional image?" "This one." Minister Wang had yet to notice Song Wuming's change in demeanor. Pointing at the image on the screen, he said, "This image was given to me by Yiming. According to the original plan, we needed to modify a decommissioned J-10 to create a diversion and conceal our real fighter jet development. So Yiming found a modification genius and this image was sent by that person." As he spoke, admiration appeared on his face. "Honestly, the effect of this promotional image has far exceeded our expectations. Once released, it will definitely attract most of the outside attention. It might even have some deterrent effect on foreign forces. The 6th-generation fighter we've been researching won't be disturbed by outsiders." But Song Guoming showed no joy. Instead, he was shocked. "A modification genius? So this person isn't from our military?" "That's right. Then who exactly is he?" Song Guoming asked hastily. Minister Wang was slightly puzzled, unable to comprehend his panic. Yet he patiently explained. Yiming said he's a sophomore at Southwest University of Science and Technology. During summer break, he worked part-time at an agricultural machinery factory modifying many machines for export. Honestly, I think he has a sense of restraint. Otherwise, given how he modifies agricultural machinery, he might have been arrested for arms trafficking. After finishing, Minister Wang asked his own doubt, "Is there something wrong with this promotional image?" Song Guoming shook his head, his face darkening. "Yiming might be in serious trouble." "What?" Minister Wang's face changed drastically. Song Guoming first calmed him down, then briefly recounted what he had seen on the plane. He then pointed at the promotional image still on the computer screen, his expression solemn. "I can confirm that the fighter in this image is identical to the one I saw in the hands of the two esteemed scholars. So, the research secrets of the 6th-generation fighter have likely been leaked." Song Guoming's words were not baseless. Although he didn't know what kind of person this Lu Feng was, it sounded highly abnormal. A sophomore university student modifying agricultural machinery into weapons. Ridiculous. Many researchers and institutes couldn't complete and export large quantities of modified agricultural machinery in such a short time. A college student did it. How was that possible? In his view, at the very least, Lu Feng's identity warranted a thorough reinvestigation. Most importantly, such a core research secret as the 6th-generation fighter had appeared in the hands of someone with a questionable identity. Since he could pass this image to the military, was it possible that he had also transmitted it to foreign forces? A leak of research secrets meant all their hard work might be in vain. After all, in the current international situation, the Eagle, Sakura, and many other nations were closely watching the rabbit. At the slightest move from the rabbit, the other side would take preventive measures immediately. For a core secret like the 6th-generation fighter, even a single rendering would prompt them to assemble a powerful research team to analyze and guard against it. Thus, the years of effort by the two esteemed scholars of the Aerospace Research Institute and countless researchers would all be wasted. Hearing Song Guoming's words, Minister Wang was now utterly stunned, his face full of disbelief. How is this possible? Song Guoming shook his head. The best-case scenario is that this Lu Feng is actually part of the research team and Chen Yiming somehow contacted him and got the drawings for the exhibition. Yiming wouldn't make such a basic mistake. Minister Wang frowned, deep worry in his eyes. But Song Guoming had no mind to dwell on that. What he had just said was the best-case scenario. If this Lu Feng was a spy sent by foreign forces into the rabbit, the consequences would be truly unimaginable. Has the promotional image been released? It's already been sent out. Minister Wang sighed. It's been out for a while. Many people have probably seen it by now. Try to recall it and minimize the impact. Song Guoming gave the order decisively. Then call Yiming over and question him thoroughly to understand the situation. I'll inform the two esteemed scholars and discuss how to resolve this with minimal damage. With a sigh, Song Guoming quickly walked out of the office. Arriving at the airshow center, he saw Li Dayo and Zhao Kangping, the two esteemed scholars, surrounded by a group of aerospace professionals. They were peppered with various technical questions. Though tired seeing so many young people passionate about aerospace, they answered enthusiastically. Elder Zhao. At that moment, Song Guoming approached and spoke softly. He exchanged a glance with the two, then smiled at the crowd. I need to discuss something with the two esteemed scholars, so the QA session will be paused. Apologies, everyone. After saying this, he led the two scholars to the backstage. Sitting on the sofa, Li Dayo took a sip of water and looked at Song Guoming. Political Commissar Song, why the urgent call? Has something happened? Zhao Kangping also looked on curiously. Song Guoming gave a bitter smile. Elderly Elder Zhao, a major incident has occurred. He pulled out his phone, found the promotional image Minister Wang had sent and handed it to them. Seeing the image, the two scholars were momentarily stunned. They grabbed the phone, zoomed in on the image and examined it meticulously. Then, they were greatly alarmed. This is a 6th-generation fighter. How do you have this? Li Dayou asked incredulously. Song Guoming briefly explained the whole story. This image has now been released as a promotional piece. The secret we've been guarding might have already been leaked. The blueprints have been leaked. Upon hearing Song Guoming's words, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping, two esteemed scholars, were instantly stunned. A surge of fury quickly rose within them. They could not fathom. When had the strictly guarded research secrets been obtained by others? Most importantly, they only learned of the leak now. Both had joined the research institute before the age of 30. They had long devoted themselves to the rabbit's aviation field with relentless effort. They had successively broken through several technological blockades, securing the rabbit's place in the current international landscape. And now researching the 6th-generation fighter. It was to ensure that the rabbit could match or even surpass various foreign forces in this era of rapid technological advancement. For this 6th-generation fighter, the two scholars, along with countless researchers, had dedicated nearly 20 years of study. Now both were growing old. Their only remaining wish was to see the 6th-generation fighter developed. But now, such confidential information had actually been leaked. Who could it be? Are they tired of living? Daring to commit such a harmful act against the nation and its people? Amidst the fury, Li Dayou also realized that anger alone could not solve the problem. So he quickly asked, "What exactly is going on? How did the blueprints leak and how did you find out?" Song Guoming briefly explained the matter. Listening to his account, the two scholars were bewildered. Was this too absurd? They initially thought this would involve the rabbit and other foreign forces, even escalating to international conflict. But, from what Song Guoming said, it seemed like a mere misunderstanding. After a moment of silence, Li Dayou spoke again. "Regardless, we must detain the suspect as soon as possible." Meanwhile, Chen Yiming also received a call from Minister Wang. "Hey old one, what's the urgent call for?" "Yiming, you're in big trouble." Minister Wang's urgent voice came through the phone. Chen Yiming was startled, utterly confused. In big trouble? What trouble? He had no idea. Thinking this, he immediately asked, "What do you mean? What happened?" "It's complicated to explain." "Where are you now?" "I'm still in the office." "Wait there," Minister Wang said over the phone, then hung up. While Chen Yiming was still bewildered, the office door was forcefully pushed open from outside. Minister Wang hurried and grabbed Chen Yiming and pulled him out. "Come with me." "Where are we going?" Chen Yiming looked utterly confused. "Don't ask, just follow. Remember, whatever they ask, answer truthfully." Chen Yiming remained bewildered. But seeing the other's stern expression, he nodded. Soon he was taken to the Aerospace Exhibition Center. He was brought before Song Guoming and the two scholars. As he stopped, Chen Yiming saw the promotional image still displayed on Song Guoming's phone screen. He also glanced at the two furious scholars beside him. Understanding dawned immediately. I apologize. He smiled apologetically at the two scholars and quickly explained. "You both had a tiring journey yesterday, so I didn't disturb you last night. And today I carelessly forgot to give you a copy of the promotional image." Indeed. Chen Yiming thought it was because he hadn't distributed a promotional image to the two scholars. Hearing his explanation, the scholars were almost amused by his anger. "Yiming!" Minister Wang quickly interjected, hinting frantically. "Who told you to say that? Confess your mistake now or no one can save you." "Mistake? What mistake?" Chen Yiming was completely lost. Was forgetting to give them a promotional image really that serious? Before he could ask, Li Dayou took Song Guoming's phone, pointed at the promotional image and asked sternly, "Tell me, where did you get this image?" "The image?" Chen Yiming was baffled. "I took it myself." "Took it yourself?" Hearing his response, Li Dayou was so enraged he almost choked. It took him a long time to catch his breath. "Damn it! The sixth-generation fighter hadn't even been built. All the research institute had were renderings. Where the hell did you get a real photo? Tell the truth, confess now. Song Guoming warned sternly. Confessing now is not too late, but if you keep playing dumb you know the consequences. Confess. What? Chen Yiming was utterly bewildered. He didn't even know what had happened so naturally he didn't understand what they wanted him to confess. Confess how you leaked state secrets. Song Guoming was furious. If the two scholars weren't present he would have taught this stubborn fool a lesson. Of course. The reason for such anger. The main cause. Was that the sixth-generation fighter on the promotional image was a vital state secret. It even involved the rabbit's long-planned Southern Heaven Gate project. If leaked, the consequences would be disastrous. Hearing Song Guoming's words, Chen Yiming's face turned pale. He had leaked state secrets. But what exactly had he leaked? Minister Wang, seeing Chen Yiming silent, was also frantic. Chen Yiming was a key talent in their military district. And they were longtime friends. If he confessed quickly and identified the real culprit he might get leniency. But if he delayed any longer, even if the Heavenly King himself came, no one could save him. Yiming, what are you waiting for? Explain how you got that promotional image. Minister Wang hinted immediately. Chen Yiming snapped out of it, panicking. Elder Geopolitical Commissar Son, I really didn't leak any secrets. The blueprint you mentioned was really sent to me by that student I found. Wait. Hearing Chen Yiming's words, Li Dayou suddenly interjected. His eyes fixed on the other. You just said he gave you a blueprint. Yes. Yes. Chen Yiming, intimidated by the fierce gaze, answered instinctively. According to plan, I had a student modify a J10 to divert attention. That student was very diligent and sent me the principal blueprint after completing the modifications. Chen Yiming didn't know. His words enraged the two elders to the extreme. The blueprint handed over. Ah. Okay. Chen Yiming pulled out his phone, opened the chat with Lu Feng and handed it over. Li Dayou took it and quickly examined it with Zhao Kongping. But as they looked, their hearts grew cold, falling into an icy abyss. It's over. Li Dayou let out a long sigh. The most crucial engine part has been leaked. It's over, it's over. Staring at the blueprint before them, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping, two national stalwarts, turned ashen-faced. They had initially thought only the exterior of the sixth-generation fighter had been leaked. Although foreign forces could speculate on its capabilities based on the fighter's appearance and devise countermeasures. Yet, speculation was after all mere speculation. With only promotional images, the enemy could only judge by appearance. They couldn't implement comprehensive countermeasures. But now they had obtained the blueprints of the sixth-generation fighter from Chen Yiming. In these blueprints, almost all the secrets of the sixth-generation fighter were annotated. Even the most critical engine components were all recorded on the blueprints. This was catastrophic. With these blueprints, it meant that the fruits of their arduous research over a decade were laid bare before the outside world. The enemy could not only take preemptive countermeasures, but could even stand on the same starting line as them in the field of sixth-generation fighters thanks to these blueprints. A decade of effort had all been in vain for others. At this thought, the two stalwarts were instantly incandescent with rage. Severe punishment. They must be severely punished. These blueprints have always been stored only within our research institute. Even personnel not involved in this project could never have accessed them. Zhao Kongping said in a grave tone. Oldly, the severity of this matter may be far greater than we imagined. So we should act quickly, first find the mole who stole and leaked the core secrets, then uncover the mastermind behind it. That makes sense. Li Dayou nodded. Those who could obtain and leak these blueprints could only be members of the research team. Realizing this, the two dared not waste any more time. With a single phone call, they summoned everyone from the research team. Urged by Li Dayou, the research team dared not delay. Soon a knock came at the door. Dean Li. Li Dayou's face was dark as thunder. He lifted his eyelids and glanced at the assembled team, saying coldly, Is everyone here? All present. The team leader replied, a flicker of curiosity in his mind. Hadn't they been told to relax? Why had they been summoned so urgently? Could there be a problem with the previous research? Just as he was wondering, Li Dayo could no longer contain himself. He spoke grimly. The blueprints for the 6th-generation fighter have been leaked. What? The crowd was stunned, then utterly bewildered. It shouldn't be. The blueprints were a state secret. They were usually stored with multiple layers of encryption and even guarded. How could they have been leaked? Could it be? Just then the team leader spoke, his face growing darker. Could there be a traitor among us? That's what we suspect. Zhao Kongping interjected. Whoever leaked the secret, step forward now, cooperate with the investigation and reveal the mastermind behind you to receive lenient treatment. Let me warn you, do not be stubborn. Do not underestimate the power of our nation. Even if you don't come forward, we will eventually uncover you. When that happens, consider the consequences. Zhao Kongping tried to coax them. But to his surprise, as he spoke, everyone present still looked utterly bewildered. For a long time no one stepped forward. Seeing this, the expressions of the two stalwarts soured further. What? Do you think him joking? Li Dayo snorted coldly and slammed his phone onto the table. Look, isn't this the blueprint for the 6th-generation fighter? Why does it appear in someone else's chat history? Give me an explanation. Hearing this, everyone rushed forward. They began to carefully compare the blueprint on the phone screen. After a few moments, the expressions of the research team gradually shifted. The more they studied and compared, the deeper their confusion grew. Something is off. The team leader looked at Li Dayo and Zhao Kongping with astonishment. Elder Zhao, are these really our blueprints? The research progress here is far ahead of ours. The team leader gave a wry smile. Hearing his words, Li Dayo and Zhao Kongping were stunned. What did he mean? The research progress on these blueprints was ahead of theirs. Coming to their senses, they rushed forward, snatched the phone and hurriedly verified it. Gradually, the two stalwarts grew excited too. Unbelievable. This is absolutely incredible. Earlier the situation was too urgent, so they hadn't studied the blueprints. Now, upon careful comparison, they discovered the bottlenecks that had plagued them had all been perfectly resolved. How was this possible? They knew these technical difficulties had stumped the entire institute for years. It was because of these obstacles that the research on the 6th-generation fighter had been delayed until now. But these difficulties had all been flawlessly solved. Who on earth had drawn these blueprints? Li Diyu's mind raced. But he couldn't figure out when such a genius had appeared in his institute. By now the research team was studying them again, looking at the precise calculations and the seemingly divine inspiration. They couldn't help but feel inferior. The person who drew these blueprints is a genius. How did he come up with this approach? Why didn't I think of it? Look here, isn't this the problem we've been working on? It's solved so simply. How is the mind of the person who drew this structured? Is this really someone from our institute? When did we have such a genius? Watching the clamor, the research team, who seemed nothing like a group of highly educated intellectuals, Song Guoming and Minister Wang standing nearby, were also baffled. What was going on? Weren't they supposed to be looking for a traitor within the team? Why had they suddenly started studying the blueprints? It seemed the blueprints Chen Yiming had handed over were of very high quality. But the research team had no time for him now. Was it just a matter of high quality? It was extraordinarily high as a 3 or 4-story building. No one explained it to him. Now absorbed in studying the blueprints, everyone had entered a state of research. Quick, transmit these blueprints to the Institute headquarters, halt all other research and fully verify the authenticity of this data. Li Dayo ordered excitedly. The research team hurriedly complied. They logged into the internal network and transmitted the blueprints. Then everyone fell into anxious waiting. Everyone stared nervously at the screen and the room fell into a dead silence. Even old Song, watching from the side, felt tense and moved with caution. Time ticked by. Soon, 10 minutes passed. In the chat window, the Institute headquarters finally sent a message. Data verification successful. All correct. Verification successful, all correct. The message from the headquarters of the Research Institute arrived. The research team members and the two distinguished academicians were all stunned. The next moment. Success. All data is correct. My God, it's actually flawless. Those mind-boggling ideas, every single one of them turned out to be right. The problems that have plagued us for so many years are all solved. A group of researchers who had spent years in the aerospace field and rarely showed emotion became excited. Some even shed tears. Tears of joy. Finally, we can see hope. Looking at the reply from the Central Research Institute, Li Diyu's eyes were streaming with tears of old age. Although the rabbit's technology had advanced rapidly over the years compared to the eagle, there were still several setbacks. Countless researchers at the institute had worked tirelessly day and night just so the rabbit could catch up with or even surpass the eagle in technology. The most crucial project among these was the Southern Heavenly Gate project. And within that project, the most important element was the sixth-generation fighter jet. Li Diyo had originally thought he might not live to see the successful development of the sixth-generation fighter. But he never expected that at this air show organized by the military to conceal the sixth-generation fighter research, he would see hope. No. It wasn't just hope. According to the data on the blueprints, it was almost certain that the technical bottlenecks of the sixth-generation fighter had been broken. Old Li. At that moment Zhao Kongping spoke, his voice even choked with emotion. Finally there is hope. That's right. Li Diyo nodded. He calmed his emotions and made a brief calculation in his mind. Soon an answer was derived. With these blueprints we can absolutely develop the sixth-generation fighter in the shortest possible time. By the time of the International Joint Military Exercise 6 months from now, our sixth-generation fighter will surely bring a huge surprise to the world. Currently every country is conducting scientific research in various fields. Naturally there are many projects similar to the sixth-generation fighter. But everyone's progress is the same, all hindered by a series of technical challenges. But the rabbit is different. Once the sixth-generation fighter is developed and brought to the joint military exercise showcase to the Eagle and other countries, whether it's a surprise or a shock remains to be seen. Of course, the main goal of everyone was not just to scare the Eagle. It was to elevate the rabbit's international standing. With the successful development of the sixth-generation fighter, the rabbit might even have the potential to take a leading role internationally. Meanwhile, watching the excited crowd, Song Guoming, Minister Wang and Chen Yiming were still rather bewildered. What was going on? Why was everyone so excited? None of the three were in the aerospace field, nor were they highly educated intellectuals. So they couldn't understand most of what the others were saying. But just by looking at everyone's expression, Song Guoming and the other two could grasp the general idea. There had been a breakthrough. So am I in the clear? Feeling the gradually easing tension in the room, Chen Yiming spoke weakly. Even now he still hadn't figured out what had happened. He had simply found a college student to be responsible for modifying a fighter jet. Then he had taken a promotional photo and was dragged here by everyone who spouted a bunch of strange things. They also said he had leaked state secrets. He knew that leaking state secrets was a serious crime. It wasn't just about whether he could keep his rank of Major General. He would probably end up in prison. So, during this time Chen Yiming had been on edge. Sensing the change in atmosphere, he quickly asked. Hearing him, Li Diyo turned around and said with profound meaning, "Things have gotten bigger." Ah. Chen Yiming was completely panicked. Li Diyo wasn't teasing him. Things had indeed gotten bigger. Across the entire blue planet there was absolutely more than just their research institute working on such international secret development projects. Perhaps another institute had made a breakthrough before them. And the modification prodigy Chen Yiming mentioned might have come from some top-tier institute. But how exactly had Chen Yiming contacted him? And why would he give these blueprints to Chen Yiming? Li Diyo wasn't the only one pondering this. Zhao Kangping's thoughts were identical. But the problem was the other party's motive. The two of them simply couldn't figure out. They exchanged glances, then looked at Chen Yiming. You said these blueprints were given to you by a modification prodigy you found? Yes. Hearing the other say things have gotten bigger, Chen Yiming felt his heart sink. He instinctively thought he had truly leaked state secrets. But seeing the two distinguished academicians asking him questions and adhering to the principle of leniency for confession and severity for resistance, Chen Yiming hastily explained. The modification prodigy I found is actually a student from Southwest University of Science and Technology. I only asked him to make a model. Apart from that, we didn't communicate much, let alone leak state secrets. The two academicians opposite, however, automatically ignored his explanation. Their attention was entirely focused on the first half of his sentence. A student. From SWST. Li Dayou frowned. He was familiar with this university. Those who could get into this school were all top-tier scholars, 1 in 10,000. But if it was really as Chen Yiming said, not only had he modified a fighter jet and completed the blueprints, most importantly, he had solved the technical problems that had plagued them for years. Even for SWST, no matter how prestigious the school, he didn't think anyone there could have done it. Thinking this, he suddenly realized this student that Chen Yiming was talking about was definitely not simple. Seeing the two lost in thought, Chen Yiming, thinking his explanation wasn't clear enough, simply suggested, if you two academicians have doubts, I can take you to meet that student. It's not far from here. Absolutely not. Song Guoming sternly objected. Letting these two academicians meet an unidentified person. What if there was a danger? Who could bear the consequences? However, Li Dayou and Xiao Kongping were somewhat tempted by Chen Yiming's suggestion. After all, he was the one who had solved the technical difficulties of the 6th-generation fighter. Moreover, he had delivered these blueprints to the rabbit's military. This at least indicated that his attitude towards the rabbit was friendly. If they could ask him some questions and learn something, wouldn't that be a great gain? Thinking this, the two academicians were about to nod in agreement. But just then, a knock sounded at the door. Come in, Li Dayou said. A staff member from the airshow walked in. Political Commissar Song, the airshow has started. Can we begin the future fighter jet model exhibition now? Ah. Yes. Song Guoming nodded instinctively. Although the blueprints were full of doubts, it was just a model after all, so nothing should go wrong. The staff member left. Li Dayou and Xiao Kongping, however, were curious. Let's go. Let's see what kind of fighter jet this genius who solved so many problems has modified. Li Dayou waved his hand and led the research team out. Song Guoming and the others quickly followed. Soon they arrived at the exhibition hall. Before them was the future fighter jet covered by a curtain. Distinguished guests. Beside the fighter jet, the airshow staff member spoke enthusiastically. The future fighter jet model exhibition begins now. With that, he grabbed the curtain and pulled it down with force. A rustling sound was heard. The skybound 6th-generation fighter jet was officially unveiled. The host's voice rang out. In an instant, the gazes of everyone present converged. The reason they had all attended this airshow was to see if the Rabbit Nation had made any new progress in the aerospace field over this long period. As the airshow began and everyone entered, they immediately noticed the massive shadow shrouded in black cloth. All the visitors were intrigued by it. Now, the black cloth was finally lifted. A colossal sci-fi silhouette was revealed before everyone's eyes. Just one glance, and all the attendees were stunned. In the vast airshow center, over 100 people held their breath. The scene fell into a deathly silence. After what seemed like an eternity, a sudden exclamation erupted from the crowd. Oh! My God! Is this the future fighter jet model? It's too lifelike. A single stone stirred 1,000 ripples. The entire venue burst into waves of exclamations. Look at the material of this model, it's actual aerospace-grade metal. They really spared no expense. And the cockpit inside. You can see it clearly through the glass. This doesn't look like a model at all. Oh my, is this really just a model? I feel like the airshow organizers are using the excuse of displaying a model to show us the latest research results from the Aerospace Research Institute. The crowd buzzed with discussion. Some even tried to step closer for a detailed look but were quickly stopped by the staff. Meanwhile, Li Dayou, Xiao Kongping, the research team, and Song Guoming and his two companions arrived late. Following the exclamations and gazes of the crowd, the researchers soon spotted the 6th-generation Skyward fighter jet, which had been concealed behind the curtain all along. Holy shit! A researcher blurted out a curse the moment he saw the fighter jet. The others managed to hold back, but their reactions were much the same. Everyone stood rooted to the spot, mouths agape, eyes wide. Their lips moved but no words came out. After a long while, Li Dayou was the first to snap out of it. He looked at Chen Yiming, who was following behind the group, and asked with a strange expression, "Is this the fighter jet that college student modified?" Yes, Chen Yiming nodded. That young man was very responsible. He not only completed all the work alone but also handled the details quite meticulously. For example, the joints in the metal exterior were finished so smoothly that without a close look you'd think it was cast from a single sheet of iron. Chen Yiming's praise was unstinting. But as he spoke, he realized his own suspicion hadn't been cleared yet because of Lu Feng's questionable identity. Realizing this, he quickly shut his mouth. However, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping exchanged a surprised glance. "Come on, let's go take a look." Saying this, the two national treasures walked towards the 6th-generation Skyward fighter jet. The others quickly followed. Seeing the two national treasures approach, the crowd who had been fixated on the fighter jet model shifted their attention to them. Elder Li is here. And Elder Zhao. No wonder the two big shots stepped away earlier. It was for this grand entrance. Is this fighter jet the latest achievement of the Aerospace Research Institute? So cool. No wonder they're the top experts in the Rabbit Nation's aerospace field, able to develop such a sci-fi fighter jet. It feels like soon, under the leadership of these masters, we'll be stepping into a sci-fi world. The onlookers were lavish with their flattery. The two national treasures smiled and greeted the crowd. Without answering much, they walked straight to the fighter jet and scrutinized it from top to bottom. As they looked, their expressions gradually grew serious. Earlier they had thought Chen Yiming's description was exaggerated. But now, seeing the actual fighter jet model, well, just the surface craftsmanship alone was beyond the capability of an ordinary person. Especially the joining points between the wings and the fuselage. The metal panels were joined without any trace, as if they were a single piece of steel. This was made exactly to the blueprint, a one-tune replica. Li Dayou's heart tightened. He exchanged a glance with Zhao Kongping and found the other man equally solemn. Since someone could produce a complete blueprint, then it was entirely possible for them to build a real 6th-generation Skyward fighter jet based on those plans. Just as they were thinking whether to notify the military to clear the area immediately, suddenly a voice rang out, "There's an instruction manual here." The two national treasures looked over and saw a member of the research team pointing at the display plaque explaining the fighter jet model. They quickly walked over. There they saw a small white sheet of paper with a simple introduction to the fighter jet model's functions. Vertical takeoff, holographic stealth, radar stealth. And the power unit uses a nuclear fission reactor. The surrounding crowd was utterly astounded by this list of names that usually only appeared in sci-fi novels. Has our Rabbit Nation's technology really advanced to this level? The country has become so powerful I feel I can stand even taller. Are these technologies real? A power module using nuclear fission. The airshow visitors buzzed with discussion. Everyone was shocked by the technologies listed on the plaque. After all, they had never even heard of such things, let alone seen them. However, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping breathed a sigh of relief. They confirmed that this so-called functional introduction could be treated entirely as science fiction reading material. The earlier technologies were somewhat plausible. But things like nuclear fission later on were pure fantasy. This meant they no longer had to worry about leaks of classified information. Elder Li, Elder Zhao. Just then an attendee looked at them expectantly and asked, "Since this fighter jet is from the Research Institute, could you two explain it to us?" This request was met with a chorus of agreement. "Yes, yes. We don't understand these sci-fi terms. Explain them to us. Give us a little something that won't compromise secrets, just to satisfy our curiosity. Thank you for your trouble, esteemed masters." Looking at the expectant crowd, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping, no longer worried about leaks, felt a moment of leisure. They nodded to the crowd and said with a smile, "Of course. Now let us take you all on a journey to imagine the future of fighter jets." My goodness, this is a lecture by a national scholar. Everyone sees this opportunity. Such a chance may come only once in a lifetime. I'm already ready to take notes. Never thought I'd live to hear a lecture from a master in the aerospace field, truly a stroke of fortune. Upon hearing Li Dayou's words, everyone present was electrified with excitement. Each person pulled out their notebooks or activated their recording devices in advance. After all, standing before them was the director of the Aerospace Research Institute, one of the two paramount national scholars in the aviation field. For ordinary people, even catching a glimpse of these two was a rare privilege, let alone listening to his lecture. If one could glean even a fraction of his knowledge, the benefits would be boundless. Seeing the crowd's fervor, Li Dayou smiled and gently pressed his hand downward. Soon, The entire convention center fell silent. This isn't a lecture but rather an invitation to envision future fighter jets. Consider it a casual post-dinner chat where everyone is free to speak their minds. Hearing this, a touch of disappointment flickered through the crowd. Yet they joined in with keen interest. After all, this was to some extent a chance for close interaction with a luminary. Lideo glanced at the functional specifications of this fighter jet model. Then, pointing to the vertical takeoff section at the top, he said, "Does anyone know how vertical takeoff is achieved and how it differs from the takeoff modes commonly used in our current fighter jets?" The onlookers shook their heads in unison. Lideo seized this moment to open the discussion. "Actually, this is quite easy to understand. Our current fighter jets employ traditional takeoff modes and everyone knows the basic operating principles. When a fighter jet takes off, it taxis onto an extremely long runway. The turbines spin to provide thrust, propelling the fighter forward at high speed. When the forward velocity reaches a certain point, the pilot adjusts the wings to alter the airflow, thereby achieving takeoff." At this point, Lideo scanned the surroundings. Seeing the onlookers nodding, clearly grasping his words. He then continued, "This takeoff mode has two major drawbacks. It takes too long and it demands excessively high standards for the takeoff site. In contrast, the vertical takeoff mode perfectly resolves both issues." As he spoke, Lideo approached the fighter jet model behind him and pointed at the nozzles. During takeoff, these nozzles rotate downward to provide lift. During cruising, these nozzles return to a horizontal position to provide forward thrust. This way, the fighter jet's requirements for takeoff and landing sites are significantly reduced. "Imagine this scenario," Lideo said, pausing briefly. "Suppose on an aircraft carrier other nations use traditional fighter jets while we employ vertical takeoff and landing fighters. When war erupts, what would be the outcome?" He looked at the crowd expectantly. Just then, a bespectacled young man in a plaid shirt, clearly an engineering student, raised his hand. "The result would be that our carrier's capacity far exceeds that of other nations. Thus, when war breaks out, we could swiftly seize air superiority and strike the enemy." "Exactly." Lideo nodded approvingly. Then he remarked, "You might think this feature is easy to implement since it sounds like just adding a mechanical module that allows the nozzles to rotate. But I must tell you, this feature is actually exceedingly difficult to achieve. To realize vertical takeoff and landing nozzle rotation is only the first step. Next, we must reduce the aircraft's weight, otherwise the lift provided by the nozzles alone would be insufficient to get the fighter airborne. And weight reduction often means a potential decrease in fuselage rigidity." Lideo spoke freely about the technical challenges involved. The audience listened with rapt attention. They pondered simultaneously. How to achieve maximum weight reduction without compromising the fighter's functionality and structural rigidity? Meanwhile, as Lideo spoke, Chen Yiming curiously edged closer. He was a former pilot. Familiar with various fighter jets, he sensed something amiss the moment he laid eyes on this model. This thing looked far too real. Just as he was about to lean in for a closer look, Zhao Kongping suddenly spoke with a smile. "Yiming, send 2 people to the cockpit to take some photos and show everyone the interior." "All right." Chen Yiming nodded promptly. After a moment's thought, he decided not to summon others but climbed up himself. Ascending the steel ladder, he opened the canopy and entered the cockpit. Chen Yiming immediately sensed something was off. What the hell? Could this be a real fighter jet? Gazing at the futuristic control panel, he froze in shock. Instinctively, he drew his limbs inward, afraid that a careless move might trigger something he shouldn't touch. What if it took off? This was still the airshow venue. No, it's just a model. What am I afraid of? As he muttered, he instinctively grasped the fighter's control stick. The next moment, Chen Yiming's mind exploded. Feeling the texture in his hand, he was utterly unnerved. Damn it. Something's seriously wrong. Hey. Why hasn't Yiming come down yet? Zhao Kongping continued interacting with the crowd alongside Lideo for a while longer, suddenly noticing that Chen Yiming seemed to have been in the cockpit for quite some time. Why was there no movement? With this thought, the two approached an observation platform nearby. But just then, from within the cockpit, a mechanical chime suddenly rang out. Pilot detected. 6th generation Skyward series initiating takeoff preparations. System self-check in progress. Chen Yiming was completely bewildered. Wasn't this supposed to be a model? Why was it running a self-check? Before he could react, the LCD screen before him even displayed Chen Yiming's pilot status. System detects nearby life fluctuations, automatically switching to vertical takeoff mode. Inside the cockpit, The intelligent prompt sounded once more. Then, the entire fighter jet emitted a piercing alarm. Warning! Warning! Fighter jet preparing for takeoff, please evacuate the vicinity immediately. Warning! Warning! Fighter jet preparing for takeoff, please evacuate the vicinity immediately. Warning! Warning! The sudden piercing alert echoed instantly throughout the entire venue. Everyone present was stunned, unable to comprehend the scene before them. Wasn't this just a model? This was so realistic. An onlooker pulled out his phone, filming excitedly. This model is incredibly lifelike, it even has its own sound system. Yeah, if they hadn't told us, I'd think it was a real fighter. Hurry and capture this is definitely the highlight of the entire airshow. The crowd was immensely thrilled. Those who had been frightened also snapped back to reality. They pulled out their phones and started recording. Meanwhile, Li Diyou and Zhao Kongping, the two national scholars, stood on the observation platform. They had a clear view of everything happening inside the cockpit, seeing all the screens light up. Most importantly, Chen Yiming's face had turned pale. The two immediately sensed something was wrong. Holy shit! Could this be a real fighter jet? The alarm grew more piercing. Li Diyou realized the fighter jet before him was most likely not a model. Everyone evacuate immediately. Everyone evacuate now. Li Diyou roared, his hoarse voice momentarily drowning out the alarms. The crowd, who had been enthusiastically filming, were stunned. Hearing Li Diyou's roar, they were all bewildered. What happened? Why evacuate? Wasn't this just a model? The quickest to react were the patrolling soldiers. Though they too were unaware of what was happening, the combination of Li Diyou's command and the increasingly frantic alarms instantly signaled that something was amiss. Evacuate quickly. Put down your phone, stop filming, get out. Several soldiers stepped forward, immediately halting the crowd's filming and organizing a swift dispersal in all directions. The crowd retreated in utter confusion. After overseeing the evacuation, Song Guoming was equally perplexed. He hurried to the observation platform and asked the two visibly tense national scholars, Patriarch Zhao, what's happening? Hearing his question, the two scholars fell silent. Although they had panicked moments ago, they could hardly believe that the fighter jet before them was a genuine sixth-generation aerial combat aircraft. They still couldn't believe it. Ridiculous. Did they really think a sixth-generation fighter was so easy to produce? Setting aside the absurdly advanced features described earlier, even with a complete set of blueprints, building one was nearly impossible. Overcoming theoretical hurdles didn't mean technical challenges could be ignored. Take the nuclear fission power module, for instance. How could that possibly be real? Even though they had witnessed the fully activated control room and heard the piercing alarms, they refused to believe it was a real sixth-generation fighter. It was too absurd. If someone could actually build a sixth-generation fighter, they would be a prize sought by every nation. Why would they bring this unreleased warplane to the Rabbit's airshow? There might be some issues, but don't worry, Li Diyou reassured the anxious Song Guoming. Just treat it as a surprise drill. Ah. Alright, Song Guoming nodded, though he didn't fully comprehend. Just then the walkie-talkie on Song Guoming's shoulder crackled to life. Political Commissar, this is Chen Yiming. I have a problem here. Ha! Song Guoming was startled. A problem? The two scholars also turned their attention to him, exchanging glances and signaling for him to respond. He pressed the talk button. Copy that, Yiming. What's the problem? Go ahead. It's like this: I'm in the cockpit of this fighter model and a startup prompt has appeared. What should I do? A startup prompt. Song Guoming's heart tightened. He instinctively looked to the two scholars for guidance. Li Diyou and Zhao Kongping were also taken aback. After a moment's deliberation, Li Diyou finally spoke. Go ahead and start it. It's probably just a simulation program. All right. Song Guoming nodded and pressed the talk button again. Yiming, you may proceed. Copy that. Came Chen Yiming's reply. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Chen Yiming breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing Song Guoming's response. Since the political commissar who was with the two scholars had given the go-ahead, what did he have to fear? After all, the political commissar was standing alongside the two scholars. Who were they? The pioneers of the Rabbit's aviation field. Two top-tier experts. When they said something, no one dared to contradict them. If the scholars said it was safe to start, then it absolutely was. I'm probably just scaring myself. This is clearly just a model. Why am I so nervous? Despite his thoughts gripping the control stick, he felt a lingering tension. Years of piloting experience told him this was no ordinary object. That Feng kid really went overboard with the details, he muttered, then realized this fighter was a modified retired J-10. Realism was to be expected. As he reached out to press the start button. Click. Chen Yiming felt his body tighten as if locked in place. Looking down. Oh, it's just the seatbelt. The lock mechanism from behind the seat had secured him firmly. This Feng is something else, making even this feel so real, he said, reaching to release the buckle. During flight, seatbelts are locked tight for safety, but they weren't flying now. Moreover, Chen Yiming was in regular attire. Being locked in like this was uncomfortable. But as his hand touched the buckle, the intelligent voice chimed again. Aircraft has started. Unauthorized operation prohibited. Chen Yiming paused. Fine. I'll leave it locked. Even though he wasn't in a real plane, it was a good habit to maintain. With that thought, he ignored the locked buckle and pressed the start button with his finger. Immediately, a series of startup prompts sounded. Fighter is warming up. Pilot, please make final preparations for takeoff. Detected that the surrounding environment is unsuitable for taxiing and takeoff. Changing takeoff method to vertical takeoff and landing. Default flight altitude 18000 meters. Chen Yiming was stunned. Wasn't this jet a model? How was it getting more absurd, even specifying a flight altitude? Damn Feng, you really know how to put on a show. Creating all these bells and whistles for a model. Beep. Pressure release system on standby. Beep. Super vector engine starting. Hearing these increasingly professional prompts, Chen Yiming actually felt relieved. A super vector engine. Did such a thing even exist? He scoffed, finding it amusing. Come on, if you're so real, try flying for real and let me see. The moment he finished speaking, a thrilling mechanical roar erupted from within the fuselage. The onlookers outside saw the two originally horizontal nozzles begin to rotate slowly. Then, boom! A deafening engine roar echoed, startling everyone in the venue. Their eyes were filled with shock and doubt as they stared at the fighter jet nearby. This noise. Was it really coming from that model? It was incredibly realistic. Holy shit. Could this actually be a real fighter jet? Boom. From the massive fuselage, a muffled roar suddenly erupted. Like a beast awakened from slumber. Everyone present was startled by the deafening sound, their movements freezing and their faces turning pale. This sound. Something's off, isn't it? It can't be real. Not just them. On the observation platform, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping, who had been so confident, were now frozen in place. As the director and deputy director of the Aerospace Research Institute, two top experts in the field and among the few national treasures of their nation, it's no exaggeration to say. Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping had encountered more aircraft than most people had eaten meals. So upon hearing that deep muffled roar, they immediately sensed something was wrong. Could this be the roar of a fighter jet engine? The two national treasures were all too familiar with that sound. Their faces changed dramatically. Damn it, isn't this supposed to be a model? Did they have to make it so realistic? Li Dayou muttered in astonishment. Zhao Kongping was equally horrified. Meanwhile, Song Wuming, standing nearby, was extremely tense as he gazed at the massive fighter jet that continued to emit a rumbling roar. He wondered if it could really be a real fighter jet. No way. Just as he was about to confirm with the two national treasures, the walkie-talkie on his shoulder crackled again. Chen Yiming's panicked voice came through, reporting to the political commissar and the two national treasures. The cockpit indicates. The aircraft's engines have started and the preset altitude is 18000 meters. Please advise on my next course of action. After the formal report. Chen Yiming added, trembling political commissar. I have a feeling this thing might be real. Upon hearing this, Song Wuming grew even more anxious. He quickly turned to look at the two national treasures, his eyes pleading for help. No kidding. He couldn't make that call. He was just a political commissar. Except for his marksmanship, he knew even less about aerospace than Chen Yiming. As he listened to Chen Yiming's words, Li Dayou shook his head. Impossible. Are you kidding? If this were a real sixth-generation fighter, wouldn't all our years of research be a joke? Zhao Kongping nodded in agreement. Indeed. A sixth-generation fighter is simply impossible to develop at this stage. Even NASA over there with the Eagles absolutely could not produce a real sixth-generation fighter under current technological conditions. Hearing this, Song Guoming understood. He nodded. If that's the case, then this must just be a prank. Indeed. Vertical takeoff and flying to an altitude of 18,000 meters. Even someone like him who knew nothing about fighter jets could tell it was nearly impossible. Alright, don't be too nervous. Li Duo composed himself and began to analyze. First, under the current level of technology, a sixth-generation fighter is absolutely impossible to build. Not just us, even the Eagle's industrial capabilities couldn't produce one. You might not understand how high the industrial requirements are to realize a sixth-generation fighter. Li Duo paused. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke. First, from an appearance standpoint, the craftsmanship required for the fighter's outer shell is an extremely difficult challenge. Look at this layer of metal skin. Doesn't it seem to have a very high manufacturing precision? Indeed. Song Guoming nodded. From the outside, the metal skin of the fighter seemed seamlessly joined. The entire aircraft, in both form and posture, was exceptionally elegant. Yes. Elegant. That word was rarely used to describe an industrial product. But at this moment it was not an overstatement for this fighter. Because the exterior design of this fighter was far too futuristic. The whole aircraft appeared to be made as a single piece, complemented by its extremely smooth lines. It looked as if it had been lifted straight out of a sci-fi movie. But the thing was, this fighter was no mere showpiece. In terms of both aerodynamic drag and radar signal evasion, it was exceptionally formidable. Among current fighters, only a batch of drones in their nation could achieve both qualities simultaneously. But the problem was, this fighter clearly had a payload capacity. After all, Chen Yiming was still locked in the cockpit. So this single challenge alone, in Li Duo's view, was extremely difficult to resolve. And on this fighter, the greatest challenge was the power issue. To lift a multi-ton fighter vertically to an altitude of 18,000 meters. As far as Li Duo knew, no country on Blue Star could achieve that. Not to mention the utterly impossible nuclear fission power engine described in the specifications. Combining all these factors, Li Duo simply couldn't believe this was a real fighter. No kidding. If this were a real sixth-generation jet, he'll eat it. As he thought this, he explained it to Song Guoming, who was listening in a daze. I understand. Just then Song Guoming turned to them and said so. This fighter absolutely can't be real. The engine sound earlier must have been a simulated effect. We can just treat it as a prank, right? That's right. Li Duo nodded. Seeing this, Song Guoming was about to press the walkie-talkie to reassure Chen Yiming. But before he could speak, Chen Yiming's voice came through again. This time Chen Yiming didn't say a word. Instead, a cold mechanical voice came from the walkie-talkie. Wings are deploying. Deployed. Engine is charging. Charging complete. Engine nozzles are rotating. A series of prompts sounded. Although they had already determined that this could not possibly be a sixth-generation fighter, the highly technical language still sent chills down the spines of Li Duo and Zhao Kongping. Accompanied by the prompts from the walkie-talkie, the two national treasures looked up and saw the nozzles beneath the fuselage actually rotating. From horizontal to vertical, downward, pointing at the ground. Immediately after, the fighter began its takeoff countdown. Sixth-generation fighter will take off in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7. Listening to the steady rhythmic countdown, Li Duo and Zhao Kangping's expressions grew increasingly strange. The surrounding onlookers were also baffled. They had initially wanted to move closer for a look, but upon hearing the countdown they instinctively stepped back. They retreated to a safe distance. 3, 2, 1. Under everyone's gaze, the countdown hit 0. Then, the roar sounded again. But this time the roar didn't come from the engines but from the two nozzles. Then everyone saw blazing flames shooting out from beneath the fighter. The massive fighter, propelled by this lift, slowly ascended into the air. Scorching flames billowed from two massive nozzles, turning the concrete floor red hot and even causing it to crack. The ambient temperature began to rise steadily. The nozzles did not reach their limit instantly. Instead, they gradually intensified their output, building up until finally full power. Then the crowd watched in awe as the fighter jet, which they had dismissed as a mere model, slowly lifted off the ground. It began to ascend, accelerating with each passing moment. In just 2 or 3 seconds after leaving the ground, it had climbed dozens of meters high. The remaining soldiers and airshow staff erupted in chaos. Everyone stared in disbelief, rubbing their eyes and pinching themselves. The sharp pain confirmed reality. And someone shouted out loud. This isn't a dream, it's really flying. Is this still a model? Since when did models become so realistic? Indeed, it's incredibly lifelike now. It's no different from a real fighter. If it can take off, does that mean all those features we thought were fictional are real? Oh my god, didn't I come here for an airshow? Could this be the launch of our 6th generation fighter? Everyone was dumbfounded. Then excitement took over. It was too surreal. The aircraft, long considered a model, had just emitted a series of warning tones. Extremely realistic. At first everyone thought it was a prank by the designer. But, unexpectedly, the engines ignited, the nozzles rotated. A mere 10-second countdown. The entire fighter had entered an operational state. Now it was even flying. Yet the researchers mingling in the crowd were not as thrilled. They watched the rapidly ascending aircraft, eyes wide, mouths agape, swallowing repeatedly. They looked as if they had witnessed something impossible, even becoming incoherent. Oh my god. Is it real? Has vertical takeoff and landing mode been achieved? But judging from the operational mode just now, this fighter hasn't been stripped of any functions. In fact, its feature list surpasses that of our previous fighters. Heavens! I can barely speak. Has the 6th generation fighter truly become a reality? The researchers, usually quiet and reserved, were now exclaiming in shock. Their outbursts filled the airshow center with noise, though it was ultimately drowned out by the roar of the fighter's engines. Meanwhile, on the observation deck, Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping, 2 esteemed scholars, stared at the ascending fighter with unwavering gazes. Their scalps tingled. Could it be a real 6th generation fighter? They had been told it was a model. The 2 scholars could hardly believe it. The 6th generation fighter, whose principles they had yet to break through, had already been built and delivered to the airshow center for exhibition. Who could have done this? Their minds were filled with questions, but before they could ponder further, their attention was recaptured by the fighter before them. Now driven by the full thrust of several engine nozzles, the 6th generation fighter had ascended to hundreds of meters in the air. The crowd strained their necks, enduring the heat to watch. Despite the discomfort, no one dared to look away, let alone blink. It was too incredible. Consider this. The fighter had soared from the ground to hundreds of meters high in less than 3 seconds. Its speed was as if an invisible giant hand had simply plucked it from the earth. And the speed was increasing as if it would never stop. Target altitude: 18,000 meters. Li Dayou murmured in horror, could this really be true? Meanwhile, watching the surroundings rapidly fall away, Chen Yiming sat in the cockpit, utterly bewildered. Damn it! How was it actually flying? Wasn't it supposed to be a model? Lu Feng, you bastard! If you wanted it to be realistic, why did you have to go this far? As the scenery outside plummeted, he realized with certainty that the fighter beneath him was climbing rapidly. As a pilot, Chen Yiming had flown many fighters. But this takeoff mode was a first. So much so that the well-trained pilot, beyond gripping the control stick tightly, had no idea what to do. Aircraft climbing current altitude 200 m. Aircraft climbing current altitude 500 m. Aircraft climbing current altitude 800 m. The alerts sounded continuously in his ears. His mind went blank. If I remember correctly, the target altitude was 18000 meters. At this rate, we'll reach it soon. What am I supposed to do then? Watching the fighter rapidly ascend and shrink from view, the 2 scholars gradually came to their senses. It was now certain this was a real aircraft employing many technologies that even the Aerospace Research Institute had yet to master. But then another question arose. Was it a bit reckless for such a fighter to take off within national airspace? If not stopped, the situation would escalate. With that thought, Li Dayou, without consulting Zhao Kongping, turned to the stunned Song Guoming behind him and urged, quickly suppress the news. Under no circumstances must information about this fighter be leaked. Ah. Yes. Song Guoming snapped to attention and began making arrangements via the walkie-talkie on his shoulder. Immediately after, the crowd that had been forcibly evacuated outside the airshow center buzzed with discussion. They had all heard the immense roar of the engine. Was that a real fighter just now, not a model? It must be, given how meticulously it was made and the warning was so realistic. Most importantly, if the model was fine, why were we evacuated? Good thing I filmed it earlier. You'll have to study it later. Be careful not to leak that video or you'll be walking around with a bounty on your head. As the crowd debated, a shocked cry rang out, "Look up at the sky." Instinctively everyone raised their heads. When they saw what was there, they were all stunned. What was that thing that had flown up from the airshow center? As they watched the rapidly ascending shadow in the sky, the crowd was momentarily stunned before snapping back to reality. Could that object in the sky be the very model they had been observing earlier? A model? Since when could a model fly? In an instant the lively discussion ceased, leaving everyone utterly speechless. Their eyes met, and the awe in their gazes was impossible to conceal. As the fighter jet ascended swiftly, realization began to dawn on the crowd. Did this mean that the rabbits had successfully developed the most advanced 6th-generation fighter? Did that imply that everything written on the function introduction earlier was true? Vertical takeoff, holographic stealth radar, invisibility, and nuclear fission reactor power module. Had our rabbits truly grown so formidable? In that instant a surge of pride welled up within them. It was often said that peace and prosperity for the people depended on a strong nation. Only with national strength could the people enjoy stability. But now, if the nation had already reached such heights, didn't it mean that everyone's lives would become increasingly prosperous? With this thought, their faces lit up with anticipation and excitement. Some students among them felt a renewed determination to shine in the field of aerospace. A few had originally planned to study abroad. But now, why bother? Which country could still surpass the rabbits in aerospace? Meanwhile, military personnel received orders and converged from all directions, beginning to disperse the crowd that had gathered once again. "Excuse me, the exhibition has now concluded. Thank you for your participation. Please leave in an orderly manner, and thank you for your cooperation," the staff recited in official tones, their expressions stern. They said nothing more, but the very brevity of their words only underscored the gravity of the situation. Elsewhere at the airshow center, the two esteemed academicians had also taken action after issuing their orders. As the fighter jet rapidly ascended, the standard military walkie-talkies became useless. "We must contact Chen Yiming as soon as possible," Li Dao declared with burning intensity. This was undoubtedly Chen Yiming's first time piloting this fighter. He would be thoroughly unfamiliar with it. Although Li Dao and the others were also seeing the actual aircraft for the first time, they had after all spent over a decade researching this field. Perhaps they could offer some assistance. Of course, their primary goal was to preserve both the aircraft and Chen Yiming's life. If any slight mishap led to the destruction of the plane and loss of life, the consequences would be catastrophic. With this in mind, Li Dao, Zhao Kongping, and Song Wuming immediately began devising ways to establish contact. "Have we connected to the satellite signal?" Li Dao asked, turning to Song Wuming. The latter operated the device before them for a moment before nodding. "Connected. Now we just wait for Yiming to approve the request and we can communicate with him." Hearing this, Li Dao nodded and stared tensely at the screen of the wireless communication device. "Hurry up and connect." Meanwhile, the aircraft continued its rapid ascent. Inside the cockpit, Chen Yiming began to regain his composure. As a soldier, he knew he must remain rational in critical moments. After the initial shock, Chen Yiming took deep breaths, finally steadying his emotions. But the question remained, what should he do next? The fighter's ascent speed was increasing. At this rate, it would soon reach the target altitude of 18000 meters. What should he do then? No. Was there a way to stop the ascent and descend back to the ground? Just as he was about to ask, suddenly the intelligence system's prompt sounded. "Wireless communication system connection request detected. Automatically parsing communication channel. Parsing complete. Please select 1. Accept call 2. Reverse monitor." Hearing this prompt, Chen Yiming froze, then his expression shifted dramatically. What kind of high-tech was this? Connecting to a wireless signal was understandable, but reverse monitoring along the signal? That was almost magical. Was this system designed by a normal person or a hacker? Despite his astonishment, Chen Yiming quickly realized this wireless signal likely came from the military or even the two academicians trying to contact him. The previous military walkie-talkies had failed. And Song Guoming was with the two academicians from the Academy of Aerospace. They were surely coming to his rescue. With this thought, Chen Yiming decisively chose to accept. Immediately the voices of the two academicians, aged yet brimming with excitement and fervor, echoed in the cockpit. "Li Dao, hello Yiming, can you hear me? Zhao Kongping, comrade Yiming, please stay calm. You'll be fine, trust us. Song Woming followed the academician's instructions. Both are top scientists from the Academy of Aerospace, they can definitely help you. Their voices came through in turn. Hearing these familiar tones, Chen Yiming gradually calmed down. Indeed. With the two academicians here, what did he have to fear? Taking a deep breath and slowly exhaling, he said, "All right. Political Commissar Song, Elder Zhao." Just then Minister Wang rushed over to the observation platform, his expression extremely grave. It's probably impossible to keep this under wraps. Too many people saw the fighter jet take off. Hearing this, though they had anticipated it, everyone felt helpless. Normally test flights for new fighters were conducted in uninhabited areas like seas or deserts. But this fighter had taken off at the airshow center. Not only had the attendees witnessed it, but also the residents living nearby. With so many eyes watching, it would be difficult to prevent information from leaking. In that case, we'll do our best to contain what we can, Li Dayo said, helplessly turning to look at the diminishing black dot in the sky. We have more important matters to attend to now. Their primary objective was to ensure the safety of the aircraft and its pilot. Just as they were about to contact Chen Yiming to check on his status, a staff member nearby announced the real-time shared image from the fighter is now connected. Hearing this, everyone quickly turned to look at the screen. There, the fighter's system prompts were displayed before them. At that moment, the fighter's altitude was still climbing and at an accelerating pace. At this rate, reaching the target of 18000 meters would take only 30 seconds. Ascending to an altitude of 18000 meters in just 30 seconds. Gazing at the estimated time on the screen, Li Dayo and Zhao Kongping instantly drew in a sharp breath of disbelief. Even the members of several research teams stared at the figure with utter incredulity. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Are you certain there's no error in the data transmission? Li Dayo asked, turning to a staff member nearby. The staff member checked the equipment and nodded affirmatively. The transmission is flawless, at least there are no issues with our equipment here. If the data seems off, the anomaly must be on the fighter jet's end. We could verify with the pilot. Li Dayo nodded, then said, "Connect me to Chen Yiming." Understood. Without a second word, the staff member pressed the communication button before them. The line between them was re-established. "Yiming, I've just received the data feedback from the fighter jet. It shows the target ascent altitude is 18000 meters and the estimated time to reach this height is only 30 seconds. Does this data match what you're seeing on your end?" After Chen Yiming spoke, everyone fell silent, even their breathing seemed to soften as they awaited his reply. After a brief moment, Chen Yiming's voice crackled through, tinged with a hint of fluster. "No issues, the fighter's display shows the same projection." The words hung in the air. A wave of astonishment swept through the room. Both national scholars and the research team members found their jaws dropping in sheer disbelief. 30 seconds to climb 18000 meters. That figure is simply too staggering. Is it even feasible? Could the fighter be falsifying its readings? After all, this data is beyond extreme. If this rate of climb is sustained, that's a speed of over 2000 kilometers per hour. And this is vertical takeoff, forced descent by nozzle thrust. If it were a runway takeoff, could it break 3000? Incredible. Even the peak velocity of our most advanced current fighters isn't this exaggerated, is it? A cacophony of murmurs erupted among the crowd. Their faces were etched with horror. The data sounded preposterous, but upon closer calculation they realized it was even more preposterous. Was this truly a velocity that could exist in reality? The fighter must be reporting false data. The Institute members simply could not bring themselves to believe it. But at this very moment, high in the sky, the sixth-generation fighter was continuously transmitting its altitude via satellite signal. Current fighter altitude 1028 meters. Current fighter altitude 1320 meters. Current fighter altitude 1675 meters. With each passing second, the fighter's altitude surged to a new level and its speed was accelerating. In a mere 3 seconds, it had rocketed nearly a kilometer upward. Watching the real-time feedback data, the Institute members were almost numb, observing their reactions. Song Woming, standing nearby, was utterly perplexed. Elderly. Isn't a fast climb rate a good thing? In his mind, the greatest advantage of vertical takeoff was reducing a fighter's preparation time. The faster the speed, the more time saved. Wasn't that the very effect they were pursuing? So why did everyone look as if they'd seen a ghost? Hearing his words, the two national scholars took a deep breath, slowly regaining their composure. Calming his emotions, Li Deo began. Speed is certainly beneficial, but the problem is, this speed is far too fast. Consider this: what exactly does it mean to reach 18000 meters in 30 seconds? At this, Song Guoming began to ponder. Soon he arrived at an answer. A speed exceeding 2000 kilometers per hour. Song Guoming's eyes widened. What did this imply? Merely its ascent velocity could traverse the entire country within an hour. Seeing his reaction, Li Deo explained, this fighter's vertical takeoff speed has already surpassed Mach 2. This velocity exceeds the maximum cruising speed of the J-20. You might not realize it, but vertical takeoff speed differs from cruising. It demands immense thrust from the engines. To my knowledge, even the world's most advanced engines cannot achieve such a feat. Li Deo paused, his gaze shifting to the screen displaying the fighter's real-time status, confirming that the aircraft suffered no damage under such extreme speed. The shock in his eyes deepened. Furthermore, at this rapid ascent, the wing's load-bearing capacity is also a concern. Yet from the current data, the fighter's wings have withstood it perfectly. Hearing this, Song Guoming realized what he was witnessing. An engine far surpassing the world's technological standards. It had emerged in their country. This realization made his head spin, a dizzying sensation washing over him. He felt almost lightheaded. When had their nation become so formidable? As these thoughts crossed his mind, the communication device beside him once again emitted the intelligent prompt shared from the fighter. The fighter has now surpassed 3000 meters in altitude. The nuclear fission reaction power module is increasing output. Power module preparing. Hearing this, the crowd, who had been deep in thought, suddenly widened their eyes in shock. What did I just hear? A nuclear fission power module. It actually exists. Impossible, a researcher blurted out in denial. Nuclear fission. That was something from science fiction. How could it appear in reality? And installed on an aircraft? Honestly, if controllable nuclear fission were possible, wouldn't the first priority be to provide resources for the nation? What genius would install such a coveted technology, the envy of countless nations, onto an airplane? What a waste! But just as they were thinking, the intelligence system's voice rang out again. Preparation complete. Nuclear fission power module accelerating. The next moment, thousands of meters above, as the system prompt sounded, the fighter's engine nozzle expanded further. Like a volcanic eruption, a thick crimson flame blasted forth. Boom! A thunderous roar echoed across the sky. Even those on the ground heard it with perfect clarity. Before they could react, the two national scholars saw the fighter's velocity on the screen skyrocketing. 270 milliseconds. 310 milliseconds. 350 milliseconds. Breaking the sound barrier. Watching the speed already supersonic and still climbing, Li Deo and Xiao Kongping were both stunned. So much for aerodynamics. This thing defies all logic. But before they could dwell on it, another tremendous sonic boom tore through the sky as the engine unleashed its full power. It was as if the air itself was being ripped apart, piercingly shrill. The vast city of Xiang was instantly engulfed by the sound, heard by every single person. They looked up in terror yet saw nothing. What the hell was that sound? Did something explode in the sky? But I didn't see anything. That sound was so sharp, as if something had broken the sound barrier. Come on, nothing in the world moves that fast. By the way, there was a similar blast at the air show earlier. Could it be a fighter jet taking off? If it's a fighter jet, breaking the sound barrier would be a piece of cake. Across Xiang City, everyone faintly heard the deafening roar just now, mistaking it for the sound of a fighter jet in flight. In truth, it really was a fighter jet. But what they didn't expect was that this aircraft wasn't cruising swiftly as they imagined. It was flying vertically. Meanwhile, after hearing that explosive boom at the observation post, everyone was utterly stunned. Are they insane? Has the world gone mad? How could it break the sound barrier while taking off vertically using only nozzles? Mind you, a fighter jet breaks the sound barrier not just with a powerful engine, but also aerodynamics. It's the combination of multiple factors that allows a fighter to reach such high speeds. But now, this fighter is taking off vertically. Those wings that provide airflow disturbance are now nothing but a hindrance. Under these conditions, reaching the speed of sound, has aerodynamics ceased to exist? Everyone on site was bewildered. recalling the voice of the intelligence system from the communication device just now. Nuclear fission reaction power module. The crowd gradually understood. Could this be the legendary brute force overcoming all obstacles? But even so, they found it hard to believe that a nuclear fission reaction module had been developed and installed on a fighter jet. What material were the wings of this fighter made of? Wouldn't they deform at such speeds? As everyone stood in shock, the numbers on the screen kept changing. The altitude surpassed 5,000 meters. And the climbing speed had reached an astonishing 650 milliseconds. That number might seem small, but it was already twice the speed of sound. Most importantly, that number was still rising. It's hard to imagine how the power module of this fighter even operates. At such speeds, won't something go wrong? Li Dao murmured. What he feared most was that providing such immense power would cause the internal fuel to run out prematurely. Mind you, they weren't at the military base now. There was no equipment for mid-air refueling. If the fuel ran out, the sixth-generation fighter and Chen Yiming would face only one outcome: destruction and death. Don't be so tense. Just then Zhao Kongping noticed his old comrade's unease. Licking his dry lips, he consoled, "Did you hear that system voice just now? Based on what we've seen so far, that system seems quite intelligent. It shouldn't misjudge the aircraft's condition." Hearing this, Li Dao recalled that when the fighter was taking off, it seemed to have scanned the environment. It had determined there was no suitable space and thus chose vertical takeoff. If that was the case, his worry was somewhat unnecessary. With that thought, he breathed a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to ask about Chen Yiming's situation, a startled exclamation from Chen Yiming came through the communication device. "What's happening? Why is the speed increasing? Mach 3. Is this really the speed a fighter should have? And this is vertical takeoff. Is this the terror of the sixth-generation fighter? At such speed, why is the airframe so solid and the wings so stable without a hint of vibration? And this terrifying engine, what technology is inside it? I feel like this engine could power not just a plane but even a rocket if you added a few more. Is it really okay to put such a device on a single plane?" A string of questions from Chen Yiming echoed through the communication device to everyone's ears. The next second, everyone fell silent. The two national stalwarts and the members of the research team opened their mouths, but for a moment nothing came out. As the elite of the Rabbit Nation in aerospace, each of them possessed profound knowledge. Any one of them could serve as a university professor. But now, staring at the ever-changing numbers on the screen and the barrage of questions from Chen Yiming, they couldn't help but fall into self-doubt. They felt that everything they had learned had been completely overturned. Most importantly, with the complete blueprints in hand, they had expected to build the sixth-generation fighter in another 6 months. Now they were all uncertain. Could such a fighter really be built in just 6 months? Meanwhile, the sixth-generation fighter's climbing speed continued to rise. It quickly broke 1,000 meters per second and was heading straight for 2,000. Most crucially, at such an incredible speed, Chen Yiming in the cockpit, aside from some force, felt perfectly fine. Gradually, even the sensation of force disappeared. As the fighter's speed slowed, all the nozzles began to work in unison. Just before reaching the predetermined position, the sixth-generation fighter automatically decelerated, then came to a halt in midair with an eerie stillness. Yes, it didn't start cruising or descending. Instead, it hovered in the air with perfect stability. The crowd at the observation post stared at the data on the screen, their expressions numb. They were beyond words. Forget it. So what if they had spent decades learning? Let it go. This thing is beyond our comprehension now. Everyone had stopped worrying about aerodynamics and such. They only hoped the fighter would return safely. Then it could be taken to the Aerospace Institute, so they could study it in depth. "Yiming, how are things on your end?" Li Dao pressed the communication button and spoke loudly. "Reporting in, I feel. Everything is normal." "That's good." Li Dao exhaled in relief, then ordered, "Now I need you to fly the fighter to the military base and land." "Can you do that?" "Yes," Chen Yiming replied loudly. After the communication ended, Chen Yiming was dumbfounded. How the hell was he supposed to control this thing? Luckily, he was a pilot by trade. The sixth-generation fighter's controls were fully simplified and intelligent. After a bit of fiddling, Chen Yiming grasped the basics. Just as he was about to fly the plane back to the base, several options appeared on the screen before him. Please select your desired flight mode. 1. Low-speed cruise. 2. High-speed cruise. 3. Extreme speed cruise. 4. Adaptive cruise. Gazing at the words on the screen, Chen Yiming felt a knot of tension in his chest. He recognized every character and understood their meaning all too well. Following his usual driving habits, he would have pushed the throttle to the max. But now he was piloting a sixth-generation fighter jet, unprecedented, the first of its kind in the world. The sheer vertical ascent speed alone told him this aircraft was leagues beyond any fighter he had ever flown before. Thus, until he fully grasped the fighter's specific capabilities, Chen Yiming dared not act recklessly. Let's start with navigation, he muttered. Letting out a long breath, Chen Yiming addressed the intelligence system. Select the nearest military district as the target. A few seconds of silence passed. As expected, the intelligence system's voice echoed through the cockpit. The nearest military district has been selected as your target. Please select the cruise mode. Hesitating for a moment as he stared at the screen, Chen Yiming finally chose adaptive cruise control. This cruise mode was generally highly intelligent. It could detect the fighter's surroundings and the pilot's driving habits. From that, it would determine the most suitable mode. Selection successful. Current mode adaptive cruise. Seeing the text confirmation, Chen Yiming did not relax. Gripping the control stick tightly, he pushed it forward slowly. Gradually, the nozzles beneath the fuselage coordinated, eventually all tilting horizontally. The fighter began to fly in a normal attitude. At least nothing went wrong. Chen Yiming wiped the cold sweat from his brow and breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he believed he could cruise to the military district without incident, a tremendous surge of force slammed into him. What the hell? Before Chen Yiming could react, he felt himself pressed firmly into the seat. What in the world was happening? Chen Yiming took deep, steadying breaths. The fighter was still in motion. Any panic-induced misoperation could be catastrophic. Not just for his own life. He was currently over the city. An accident would endanger countless civilians. The deep breathing worked well. Soon Chen Yiming calmed down. Immediately after, the intelligence system's voice sounded in his ear. Adaptive cruise activated. Currently in low-speed cruise mode. Low-speed cruise. Feeling the immense force, Chen Yiming's mouth twitched as he looked at the screen. The speed indicator clearly displayed the current velocity. 3690 km/h. Mach 3. You call this low-speed cruise? Chen Yiming felt like breaking down. He was right, he still couldn't fully trust this fighter. It promised low-speed cruise and gave him Mach 3. What would high-speed cruise do? Turn him into a beam of light? As he inwardly grumbled, the communicator crackled with Li Diyu's voice. Yiming, what are you doing? I told you to go slow and steady. And you're hitting Mach 3. Slow down immediately. Hearing the mild reprimand in Li Diyu's tone, Chen Yiming was almost in tears. Elderly. I don't know either. I just activated adaptive mode, which switched to low-speed cruise, and then it exceeded Mach 3. What? On the observation deck, Li Diyu's eyes widened as he listened. This speed was low-speed cruise. Whoever programmed the speed system must have had a screw loose. Li Diyu grumbled internally, glancing at the screen beside him. It displayed the fighter's real-time status. But when his eyes landed on the speed column, he realized the speed was still rising. The original Mach 3 speed continued to climb, and rapidly, in the blink of an eye, it reached Mach 3. 6. That was nearly 4500 kilometers per hour. More importantly, the communicator relayed no mode change, only Chen Yiming's startled cries. So, the sixth-generation fighter is still in low-speed cruise mode. After a moment's thought, Li Diyu arrived at this conclusion. He was stunned. Mach 3. 6 would be high-speed cruise for an ordinary fighter. Yet for this sixth-generation aircraft it was still low speed, not to mention the existence of high-speed or even extreme-speed cruise modes. Damn, how fast would it go on extreme speed? I can't wait to dismantle that engine and see how it's designed. Mach 3. 6 as low-speed cruise, unheard of. Maybe this fighter only has one mode. At this rate, it'll reach the destination soon. But the question is, can the pilot even brake safely at this insane speed? I wonder how terrifying the speed would be if it activated extreme cruise. The crowd buzzed with amazement. It wasn't that they were easily impressed, such a fighter was simply too rare. No. It was practically unprecedented. They barely had time to consider the fighter's full value. Just the engine alone could revolutionize countless industries. As they marveled, a staff member suddenly cried out the speed. It's reached Mach 4. 5. What? Li Diyu's face changed. He rushed to the screen, staring intently at the numbers. To everyone's shock, the fighter's speed was still climbing. In mere moments it hit Mach 4. 5 over 5500 kilometers per hour. Most importantly, at this extreme velocity, the fighter still reported low-speed cruise mode. Staring at the screen, the onlookers were speechless, unable to find words to describe the fighter's might. And there was another serious issue to consider. At such speed, could the pilot withstand it? Mach 4. 5 was 5 times the speed of sound. Even with the cockpit's protection, the inertia from this speed was not something an ordinary person could endure. Thinking this, Li Diyo hurriedly asked Yiming, "How are you feeling?" The communication channel fell silent. Chen Yiming's reply was long in coming. Just as they feared he had lost consciousness under the force, the intelligence system spoke again. Pressure relief system activated. Pressure release device system activating. Activation successful. The instant the intelligence system's voice sounded. Inside the cockpit, Chen Yiming, firmly strapped into the pilot's seat as the fighter jet speed continuously increased, suddenly heard a pneumatic sound beside his ear. It was as if some kind of air pressure device had been triggered. The next moment, the immense inertia caused by the rapid acceleration began to fade away bit by bit. Chen Yiming felt his body relax. Gradually his hands could move again. His body no longer felt as if it were burdened by a 1,000-pound weight. He felt considerably lighter overall. What is this? Chen Yiming was bewildered, momentarily unable to process what was happening. He now felt he could move freely. Turning his head to look outside the cockpit, he saw the fighter jet was still at an extreme speed. The surrounding scenery was retreating rapidly behind. In fact, it seemed even faster than before. He then turned to look at the screen in front of him. Current speed Mach 4. 5. Current mode low-speed cruise. Chen Yiming was speechless. This was already 5 times the speed of sound, yet it was still considered low-speed cruise. He wondered if this fighter jet only had this one mode. He felt like complaining. But soon he realized a very serious matter. Under such immense acceleration, he no longer felt any inertia. The fighter jet's speed had gone from 0 to Mach 5 in less than a minute. With such a rapid increase in speed, the most obvious sensation for the pilot would be inertia. Furthermore, under such a massive force without adequate protection, a pilot could suffer from internal organ displacement or even crushed bones due to the powerful inertia. Even with the cockpit's protection, the pilot's experience shouldn't be much better. But now, Chen Yiming felt no discomfort whatsoever. No, to be precise, it was right after that system prompt, some kind of pneumatic device was triggered inside the cockpit. Then the inertia on me was neutralized. Thinking this, Chen Yiming began to slowly move his hands and lift his feet. Indeed, there was no feeling of inertia at all. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Just then Li Diyu's voice came through the communication device. Yiming. Yiming. How are you feeling now? Li Diyu's voice was urgent. Chen Yiming quickly replied, I feel good. He then recounted what had just happened. After that, the entire communication channel fell silent. At the observation platform, listening to Chen Yiming's response, the 2 distinguished scholars and the many research team members present looked at each other, their faces full of shock. As a pilot, Chen Yiming didn't understand the technology. He could only feel the effect of the so-called pressure release device. He thought it was some new technology. But Li Diyo understood. Zhao Kongping understood too. Neutralizing gravitational acceleration while accelerating. Li Diyo murmured, swallowing hard. His eyes wide, his throat dry. It took him a long moment to force out a sentence. This should defy physics, shouldn't it? Yes, it does. Zhao Kongping was equally stunned. He felt that the 2 of them who had originally come seeking inspiration were instead having their horizons broadened by this airshow. Truly an eye-opener. In the current state of the Dragon Nation, there was also no solution for the inertia caused by continuous acceleration. Because it was a fundamental principle of physics. Like a rocket, When launching rapidly, astronauts also feel this force that almost crushes them. But astronauts could only endure it with their physical fitness. The same applied to fighter jets. Yet, unexpectedly, a problem previously solved only by training pilots' force tolerance was now resolved by a technological device. This was a complete violation of physics. At the same time, the two noticed that the fighter jet speed was still increasing. In the time they had been talking, the speed had risen from Mach 4.5 to Mach 5. Could the fighter jet's data be faulty? Li Deo came to his senses and frowned at the real-time speed displayed on the screen. In just a few seconds, the speed had increased by another Mach 0.5. In his understanding, the only device capable of such terrifying speed was a missile. This wasn't because the propulsion module behind a missile was extremely powerful, but because the missile itself was light enough. Conversely, if a missile were scaled up to the size of a fighter jet, then its propulsion module would also need to be expanded countless times. But the question was, did such a propulsion module even exist? Meanwhile, under Chen Yiming's control, the 6th generation Skyward was heading towards the nearest Southern Theater Command. Almost there. Watching the destination getting closer on the map, Chen Yiming breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he landed the fighter jet smoothly in the theater, he would be free. The pressure of flying this jet was immense. Even now, the fighter jet speed was still climbing. Fortunately, it had a built-in cruise control system. Otherwise, if he had to operate it manually, a single mistake could send the jet miles off course. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was, if he accidentally triggered some device he shouldn't have and an accident occurred, then even if he had 10 lives, he wouldn't be able to compensate for the loss. Meanwhile, at the Southern Theater Command radar department, something is approaching. The radar operator stared at the small red dot on the screen rapidly closing in on their position, his expression turning serious instantly. He immediately pressed the communication button connecting to the head of the radar department. Chi Wei reporting, sir. Radar has detected something rapidly approaching our location. And its speed is extremely high. Based on measurements, the object's speed exceeds Mach 5 and will reach us very soon. Lock onto the target immediately and track it in real time. Chi Wei ordered immediately upon hearing the radar operator's report through the communication device. Soon a middle-aged officer in his 40s or 50s burst in. It was Chi Wei. He first looked at the flashing red dot on the screen. His expression solemn, he turned to the others and asked, "Can we determine the identity of the unidentified flying object?" "We have locked onto the target as per your instructions, but we cannot confirm the specifics yet," the radar operator immediately replied. Seeing this, the soldiers present began to speculate based on their experience. Could it be a reconnaissance probe from another country entering our territory? Very likely, because this speed is just too fast. If it's a lightweight probe with a high-power engine, it might indeed achieve this speed. These people are out of line, daring to trespass into our airspace. I think we should try to intercept it. Once we identify which country the probe belongs to, we can pressure them internationally. Everyone was discussing animatedly. But just then Chi Wei, who had been pondering, noticed the flashing red dot on the screen had increased its speed significantly. What's happening? He was greatly alarmed and quickly looked at the radar operator. The operator immediately performed calculations. "Sir, the object's speed has reached Mach 10. Mach 10. Chi Wei's eyes widened. He then realized that something capable of this speed was unlikely to be a probe. Could it be a missile? Sound the alarm. Chi Wei's expression changed drastically as he gave the order, "This thing isn't a probe, it's very likely a missile. Sound the alarm immediately." Witnessing this velocity, the entire radar department was astounded. As the most fully equipped radar division of the Rabbit's Southern Theater Command, boasting the most extensive array of devices, their functions were far more extensive than one might imagine. Should war erupt, this radar base would envelop the entire southern region of the Rabbit in its protective watch. It would detect any enemy incursion in the first instant and initiate countermeasures. Yet the problem remained. War had not broken out at this moment, had it? How then could an unidentified flying object be hurtling towards them? The personnel of the radar department were utterly perplexed regarding the specific details of this unknown object. They were equally baffled. Initially, they speculated it might be an unregistered Rabbit fighter jet. But the issue was, the velocity of this unidentified object was simply too extreme. The moment it was detected, it possessed a speed of Mach 5. What fighter jet could ever achieve such velocity? Not to mention, within the brief span of their conversation. The speed of this unidentified object had doubled in an instant. Mach 10. Now they were certain. This thing was definitely not a fighter jet. For even the most advanced fighter jets in the world could never reach such a speed. There was no other explanation besides a missile. Yet the problem persisted. This was the southern military region after all. Furthermore, it was deep within rabbit territory. How could a missile strike possibly occur here? One must understand that the rabbit's military capabilities were now exceptionally formidable, especially in border defense. It was difficult enough for enemy aircraft to even enter, let alone a missile. The moment an enemy nation launched the rabbit would detect the missile. Before it ever entered rabbit airspace, countless fighter jets would already be poised for interception beyond the borders. How could such a situation arise? Not only had they failed to intercept it, but they had allowed a missile to fly deep into the rabbit's heartland. Most critically, the border defenses had transmitted no information whatsoever. Could it be one of our own rabbit missiles? At this thought, Chi Wei immediately turned to the communications officer beside him. Contact the missile division immediately. Yes, sir. The call connected. Chi Wei immediately demanded of the person on the other end, are you conducting a missile test without notifying the radar department? Do you have any idea how severe the consequences of such an action could be? Chi Wei's voice was laced with anger. But before he could finish, the voice on the other end replied innocently, no, we haven't launched any missiles. Besides, that would be a fundamental mistake. Listening to this, Chi Wei was momentarily stunned. He hung up the phone, his brow furrowed in deep thought. If it was a missile launched by the missile division, it might be manageable. After all, one's own people wouldn't bomb themselves, would they? But if they couldn't determine the nature of the unidentified object, then they were in serious trouble. Activate the highest level air defense alert. Yes, sir. As a massive crimson button indicating danger was pressed in that very instant, a piercing air raid siren wailed to life. Every department within the southern military region received the message at once. Hurry, hurry, evacuate immediately. Get to the underground shelters. Move it. Everyone run. Across the entire southern military region, soldiers who had been training abruptly changed course, heading towards the underground air defense facilities. Not just them. Every department received the news instantly. Critical equipment was urgently disassembled, then carefully transported. Faced with an unknown threat, no one dared to entertain even a shred of wishful thinking. These devices contained the painstaking efforts of countless scientists. If they were damaged, rebuilding them would consume an immense amount of precious time. Most importantly, the vast troves of data within them would be completely lost. Such a loss would be a severe blow even for the rabbit. Simultaneously, the piercing air raid sirens echoed throughout the city. No one knew what was happening. But as the sirens grew more urgent, a sense of inexplicable tension gripped the citizens' hearts. However, the city was not a military zone. People merely fled their office buildings in a panic, standing bewildered on the streets, unsure of what to do. Fortunately, at that moment, military vehicles sped into view. Soldiers clad in green uniforms leaped from the vehicle's air raid. Everyone evacuate to the safe zones. Follow me, everyone. There's time, please don't push. The soldiers took it upon themselves to shoulder the responsibility of evacuating the populace. They guided the bewildered crowd standing on the streets towards the nearest air raid shelters. Elderly individuals with mobility issues were carried on the soldiers' backs. The once chaotic streets were instantly transformed into an orderly procession. At that moment, although no one understood the cause, the sight of these soldiers instilled a strange sense of security in their hearts. Soon the civilians on the streets were evacuated and safely inside the shelters. The soldiers remained behind to calm the people's anxieties. Meanwhile, at the airshow center, the air raid sirens also sounded. The alarm here was even more intense. Safety indicator lights on the walls illuminated, casting a red glow that reached every corner. A sight that immediately conveyed that something momentous was unfolding. Li Dao, Zhao Kanping, and the rest of the research team who had been analyzing the fighter jet's data were equally astonished. An air raid siren. Why so sudden? And judging by the severity, was it the highest level alert? Wasn't this an alarm reserved for times of war? Had an enemy nation attacked while they were researching the 6th-generation fighter jet? Who the hell would be so audacious, so reckless? Yet after much deliberation, they couldn't think of any nation in the current international landscape foolish enough to provoke the rabbit. Thus their gazes instinctively turned to Song Guoming. Since the alarm originated from the military region, this political commissar must know something. But when they looked at Song Guoming, they found his face just as bewildered as theirs. Clearly he was also in the dark about what was happening. Just then a series of urgent beeps sounded. Radar department. Song Guoming was surprised to see the caller ID on the communication device. Nevertheless, he decisively answered. The moment the line connected, Chi Wei's urgent voice came through, reporting to the commissar, "This is a level 1 emergency. An unidentified flying object has been detected over the southern military region, suspected to be a missile strike. We have initiated civilian evacuation procedures. Please provide further instructions, Commissar." A missile. A strike. Hearing these words, Song Guoming's eyes widened. "When did you detect this missile? Tell me every detail." As he spoke, Song Guoming also began leading the two distinguished scholars and the research team towards the air defense shelters. "Our radar department just detected an unidentified object traveling at over Mach 5, rapidly approaching the military region. Initially we thought it was a probe, but its speed instantly increased to Mach 10. Therefore our department has determined it must be a missile." Wait. As he listened to Chi Wei's report, Song Guoming suddenly halted mid-step and quickly turned back. Staring at the real-time fighter jet data on the screen, he asked, "What is the missile's speed now?" Hearing Song Guoming's question, Chi Wei was also taken aback. He then instructed the radar operator to report the current speed of the unidentified flying object. The moment he relayed the information to Song Guoming, he heard a sigh of relief on the other end. "Old Chi, you've got it wrong." "Got it wrong?" Chi Wei was a bit bewildered. On the other side, Song Guoming chuckled and said, "That's right, you've mistaken it. The unidentified flying object you detected is not a missile. It's a fighter jet, and it's one of ours." Hearing this, Chi Wei was stunned. "What the hell? A fighter jet? How could that be?" Chi Wei was utterly incredulous. Initially he had suspected the UFO might be an aircraft. But after witnessing its astonishing speed, he had dismissed that notion entirely. He couldn't help but ask, "Political Commissar, are you sure about this? This thing is flying at Mach 10. What fighter jet can reach Mach 10? As the director of the radar department, Chi Wei had extensive knowledge of fighter jets. He knew that even the most advanced aviation power, the Eagle, could absolutely not produce a fighter capable of Mach 10. This was not simply a matter of engine power. It involved multiple complex factors. Not to mention, Song Guoming had just said this Mach 10 fighter belonged to us rabbits. When did our rabbit develop such an incredible fighter? Song Guoming couldn't believe it. But just then he suddenly received a message. Opening it. "You have been granted satellite image viewing permission." Song Guoming's voice followed immediately. "I've unlocked the satellite image permissions for you. Take a look and see if your so-called UFO is actually an aircraft." Hearing this, Chi Wei was still somewhat skeptical. He opened the satellite images. Soon an image of a fighter jet with an exaggerated, highly sci-fi design appeared on the screen. Moreover, beside the image, the jet's data was displayed. Speed Mach 10, mode low-speed, cruise coordinates. It's exactly the same. Looking at the data and verifying it several times, Chi Wei's eyes widened in disbelief. The coordinates were identical and the incredible speed matched perfectly. But the question was, why was it in low-speed cruise? However, Chi Wei didn't dwell on this issue. Instead, he stared at the elegantly designed fighter on the screen, gradually lost in thought. Elegant. Utterly elegant. Indeed. Even while flying at such a high speed of Mach 10, the fighter showed no anomalies. It appeared incredibly stable. This could only mean one thing. The aerodynamics of the fighter's exterior had reached a pinnacle of perfection. The upper and lower airflows were consistent and the split wingtips were constantly adjusting. This ensured that regardless of the conditions, the fighter could fly smoothly without any turbulence. It really is a fighter jet. Chi Wei was dumbfounded. He wasn't the only one. All members of the radar department gathered around. When they saw that the UFO streaking at Mach 10 was indeed a fighter jet, their eyes widened. "Old Chi, don't be so tense. This is just a flight test, we simply forgot to inform you." Ah. Chi Wei was dazed. If it had been any other department causing such a major blunder, regardless of who it was, Chi Wei would have snapped back. But watching the fighter jet speeding across the screen, Chi Wei felt only excitement. Our rabbit in the aviation field has finally risen to prominence. At the observation post. Hearing the conversation between Song Guoming and Chi Wei Li Deo, and the red team from the research group also realized it was a false alarm. This really is. Li Deo couldn't help but smile wryly. However, Song Guoming was not to blame. After all, who could have imagined that what was supposed to be a model would suddenly take flight? And its performance was utterly astonishing. Vertical takeoff and landing speed exceeding Mach 3. In horizontal cruise, even at low-speed cruise, it reached an incredible Mach 10. Although they suspected the speed might be exaggerated, it was still incredibly impressive. But just as they were shaking their heads with wry smiles, Zhao Kongping suddenly spoke up. "Old Li, did you hear what the radar department said just now?" "What?" Li Deo was confused. Zhao Kongping swallowed hard and said hoarsely, he said, "The radar detected the fighter's speed at Mach 10. So what?" Li Deo started to say, but then he froze mid-sentence. Earlier they had thought the fighter's data was exaggerated. After all, Mach 10 was an utterly absurd speed. Mach 10 is 12250 km/h. For context, the circumference of the Earth is only about 40000 kilometers. That means at this fighter's speed it could circumnavigate the globe in less than 3 hours. Was this speed even real? This was precisely why everyone had been reluctant to believe it. But now the data detected by the radar department perfectly matched the real-time feedback from the fighter. What did this mean? It meant that everything earlier was correct. The fighter's flight speed had indeed reached Mach 10. This. Li Deu's voice was dry. The smile on his face vanished and he was engulfed in unprecedented shock. He was not alone. Everyone present was stunned by this terrifying data. For a moment the entire observation post fell into dead silence. After a long while everyone snapped out of it. Li Deo frowned and looked at Zhao Kongping. Which research institute developed this fighter? Though it was a question, he already had an answer in his mind. And then Zhao Kongping voiced the speculation they both shared. If I had to pinpoint one, it would most likely be Lin Zipu, the chief engineer of the Xinfei 601 Research Institute. Hearing this, Li Deo nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, the members of the research group stared wide-eyed. Lin Zipu. That name was legendary in their aviation field. Who would have thought that after being quiet for so long he would emerge with such a terrifying fighter? As everyone continued to speculate, Chi Wei, having confirmed the crisis was over, directly called the missile department. "Hello. The crisis is resolved. The alarm was a false one caused by Political Commissar Song's secret test flight of a new fighter which he forgot to notify us about. You can stand down from combat readiness." "What did you say?" The voice of the missile department director roared through the phone. "The air defense system has already automatically launched interceptor missiles, and you're telling me this was a secret flight test?" Just moments ago. After receiving a message from Chi Wei, the head of the radar department, the missile department initially did not react. However, to avoid any potential blunder, the missile department immediately conducted a thorough inspection of the entire unit. After confirming that they had not conducted any missile tests during that period, they fell into deep contemplation. Why would Chi Wei ask such a question? Before they could figure it out, suddenly a level 1 alarm blared. Staring at the glaring warning lights, the missile department finally snapped to attention. Since the radar department had detected a missile and they had no recent missile tests, there was only one possibility: enemy attack. Realizing this, the missile department immediately went on full alert. Though they wondered in this peaceful era which reckless fool would dare provoke the rabbit. But since they had come, they would ensure they never returned. As they thought this, the missile department also scanned an unidentified flying object at an altitude of nearly 2,000 meters. To evade the radar, these guys really went to great lengths. The head of the missile department said in a deep voice, a sinister grin spreading across his face. Did they think they could threaten our nation's territory with such a tactic? How they underestimate the rabbit. Upon detecting the missile, the department head showed not a hint of panic. Such a blatant intrusion into our airspace. Once caught by radar, the air defense system would automatically intercept it. No matter what it was. Dare to violate our airspace and they'd taste our Dongfeng Express. As he mused, the interceptor missile was swiftly launched. Just as he sat back waiting for a thunderous roar in the sky, the phone suddenly rang. What? It's not a missile. It's the new aircraft from the Political Commissar's team on a test flight. And our pilot is on board. Why the hell didn't you say so earlier? I've already launched the missile. Hearing the missile department head's words, Chi Wei was horrified. Damn it. You're never this fast during drills. But when something real happens, you really go all out. However, Chi Wei couldn't blame the other party too much. After all, it was his own mistake first. And the head's swift action was meant to protect the city's populace. But that wasn't a missile. This was a colossal blunder. Not only would they destroy their newly developed aircraft, but they'd also lose a pilot. After all, compared to the aircraft, the pilot was the true treasure. The cost of training a skilled pilot was immense. A genius selected from 1 in 10,000, even 100,000 or 1,000,000. And this pilot, nurtured with the nation's utmost resources, was about to be blown to pieces by a missile due to their operational error. The thought alone made Chi Wei tremble uncontrollably. He quickly said, "What are you waiting for? Stop the missile immediately. This is a missile and it's one launched automatically by the air defense system. It's already been launched. How can I stop it?" On the other end, the missile department head's voice was equally furious. He said in a low tone, "Let me tell you, this is the CJ-9, the strongest missile in our air defense system. You know its specifications. Once launched, it's irreversible, the trajectory can't even be altered, let alone stopped." Hearing the name CJ-9, Chi Wei's heart skipped a beat. He was all too familiar with this missile. It was a trump card of the Rabbit military. This missile had a nickname in the forces, Shen Yuan Arrow. Because once launched like the arrow shot by Neza in ancient times, it would not relent until the target was destroyed. In other words, the only way to stop this missile was to destroy the fighter jet. It's over. It's all over. Chi Wei's face turned ashen. He had thought that detecting the danger in time might earn him some merit. But now, his error would lead to a pilot's death. When that happened, forget about being reprimanded by superiors. He might as well resign in disgrace. No. He probably wouldn't even get the chance to resign. Someone would likely escort him to a military court at any moment. No, it's not over yet. Shaking off his despair, Chi Wei snapped back to reality. If he couldn't solve it, it meant he was incompetent. But weren't there 2 national scholars? They would surely have a solution. With that thought, he quickly pulled out his phone and dialed. Meanwhile, Song Guoming stood on the observation platform watching the 2 national scholars and the research team members as they speculated on the fighter jet's engineer. From top to bottom, inside and out, they listed almost every possible name of someone who could have built the aircraft. Finally, they settled on the name Lin Zefu. Though Song Guoming wasn't familiar with it, he had a vague feeling he'd heard it somewhere. He couldn't recall at the moment. Just then a crisp ringtone sounded. Chi Wei. Seeing the caller ID, Song Guoming was taken aback. Hadn't the problem been resolved? Hadn't they confirmed that the object in the sky wasn't a missile but a fighter jet? Why was he calling again? Puzzled, Song Guoming chose to answer. But the moment he did, he heard Chi Wei's voice. "Political commissar, it's bad, a huge disaster." Chi Wei's voice boomed through the receiver so loud that Song Guoming wondered if he had it on speakerphone. Apologetically smiling at the 2 national scholars and the research team whose discussion had been interrupted, he frowned and said, "What's all the fuss about?" "It's bad, political commissar. When I relayed the news to the missile department, they had already launched a missile to intercept the aircraft." "What?" Song Guoming froze, his eyes wide. "Didn't they know it was our fighter jet on a test flight? They only found out after launching the missile. Damn it." Song Guoming cursed. "Is there any way to fix this? Like altering the trajectory, detonating it early, or even disabling it? If nothing else, launch another missile to destroy this one first. That's not just a new fighter, our pilot is on board." Song Guoming asked urgently. His answer was Chi Wei's helpless sigh. "Political commissar, I've suggested all that, but it's useless. Because the missile department launched is the CJ-9. "What?" Song Guoming's eyes widened in shock. Chi Wei, unaware of the expression on the other end, continued in a somber tone, "The CJ-9 can't change course, can't be recalled, and can't be intercepted by another missile because its top speed is Mach 20. 20 Mach." Upon hearing Chi Wei's words, Song Guoming, including the 2 academicians who had gathered around in the research team, felt their hearts sink. They had originally believed that the missile department had merely launched an ordinary missile. After all, the cruising speed of a standard missile hovered around 10 Mach. It was crucial to note that at that moment the fighter jet piloted by Qin Yiming had also reached a speed of 10 Mach. With both objects at identical velocities and maintaining a distance of hundreds of kilometers, as long as Chen Yiming reversed his fighter's course, he could leverage the aircraft's speed to sustain the gap with the missile. This strategy might exhaust the missile's fuel before it could catch up. A missile devoid of fuel would pose no threat. In their estimation, this was the sole solution. However, the missile department had launched the Red Shield CJ-9 missile. What? At this devastating news, academicians Li Dayou and Zhao Kangping's faces turned ashen. The hearts of the research team plummeted from their earlier excitement into an abyss of despair. They never imagined that a test flight would culminate in such a catastrophe. According to their projections, the fighter was due to arrive at the military district shortly. Then they would all rush over to dismantle and study the aircraft. Although they had yet to overcome the technical hurdles of the sixth-generation fighter. With a prototype in hand, it would only be a matter of time before they mastered all the technologies and produced Rabbit's very own sixth-generation fighter. Yet, unexpectedly, the hope they had barely glimpsed. So little time had passed. They hadn't even witnessed all the functions of this aircraft and everything was about to be lost. It's over, it's truly over now. Li Dayou lamented on the verge of tears. He was all too familiar with the Red Shield CJ-9 missile. Its maximum speed reached a staggering 20 Mach and it would not relent until its target was destroyed. Faced with such a terrifyingly swift weapon of mass destruction, the sixth-generation fighter, whose speed had once seemed impressive, now appeared utterly hopeless. Elderly, a member of the research team, spoke hoarsely. If the sixth-generation fighter can maintain a speed of 10 Mach, it will take the missile at least a dozen minutes to catch up. But in those dozen minutes it seems there's nothing we can do. Not necessarily. Zhao Kangping interjected, striding over to Song Guoming and asking rapidly, if we dispatch a fighter now to assist Chen Yiming in intercepting the missile, what are the chances of success? Elder Zhao, I've considered that approach as well, but Song Guoming sighed, our current fighters still employ traditional takeoff and landing modes. The mere act of taking off would waste a considerable amount of time. Moreover, the speeds of both our fighters and the Red Shield missile far exceed what these conventional aircraft can achieve. They can't even keep pace, let alone intercept. As Song Guoming finished speaking, he saw the two academicians and the research team members slump in dejection. The dawn of the sixth-generation fighter was within reach, yet they could only watch helplessly as it was obliterated. Even Song Guoming could empathize with that profound sense of powerlessness. With this in mind, he hastily asked Chi Wei, is there truly no way? Must we simply watch the missile destroy the fighter? On the other end of the line, Chi Wei was silent for a moment before speaking gravely. There is one method. It requires the fighter to exceed 20 Mach and sustain that speed for a continuous 7,000 kilometers. In that case, the fuel in the missile's propulsion module would be depleted. Thus the fighter could avoid being destroyed. As Chi Wei spoke, his voice gradually faded. He knew this was impossible. No fighter jet in the world could currently surpass 20 Mach, let alone maintain that speed for 7,000 kilometers. With Rabbit's current technology, the most advanced fighter had a combat radius of merely over 1,000 kilometers. Yet to shake off the missile, a flight of a full 7,000 kilometers was required. This was an utterly impossible feat. At this thought, he too felt a sense of despair, and had even begun to resign himself to facing a court-martial. The two academicians and the research team fell into a profound silence. At this moment they had no heart left to speculate on who had developed this aircraft. For the fighter was on the verge of destruction. Before they could even study it, it was about to be blown to pieces. And just then, the missile was also detected by satellite, appearing on the screen before everyone's eyes. At that moment, a new alert appeared on the screen. Comrade Political Commissar, the Red Shield missile is currently heading toward the fighter at 6.5 Mach and its speed is increasing rapidly, a staff member promptly reported. What about the sixth-generation fighter? The fighter's current speed is 12 Mach, but its acceleration is much slower than the missile's. At this rate, the missile will catch up before long, and then the staff member trailed off. Everyone understood. Even if the sixth-generation fighter could sustain a high speed of 12 Mach, the Red Shield missile's maximum velocity was a formidable 20 Mach. Faced with such a vast disparity, the outcome was already sealed. Don't panic. At that moment, Song Guoming spoke to reassure them. Even if the missile reaches 20 Mach, it will still take considerable time to catch the fighter. In that time, we might devise a solution. Song Guoming was not speaking idly. Based on the current speeds, the missile could not close the gap in a very short time. And ample time meant greater room for variables. At least now. A plan was forming in Song Guoming's mind. If Chen Yiming flew toward another missile launch site and that base was notified to launch a missile in advance to intercept the Red Shield CJ-9 as Chen Yiming's fighter approached. Although this approach was highly risky and demanded exceptional coordination among the parties involved, it was the only option. With this in mind, Song Guoming wasted no time and immediately relayed the situation and his proposed plan to Chen Yiming. What? In the cockpit, Chen Yiming was dumbfounded. What had he done to deserve this? Not only had he been inexplicably strapped into this bizarre aircraft, but now he was being chased by his own country's missile. This was incredibly rotten luck. Chen Yiming was in agony. But just then, the fighter's intelligence system voice rang out. Detected that the fighter has been targeted by a missile. Assessing threat level. Assessment in progress. Assessment complete. Threat level 0. The intelligence system's voice was mechanical and cold. Yet at that moment to Chen Yiming's ears it sounded incredibly sweet. Simultaneously, the intelligence system's prompt was transmitted via the communication system to Song Guoming, the two academicians, and the entire research team. Upon hearing those words, especially the final threat level 0, everyone was stunned. Could the system be malfunctioning? That was the nation's most advanced missile. The Red Shield CJ-9. A missile with a maximum speed exceeding 20 Mach. And it was being classified as a threat level of 0. Upon hearing the voice from the fighter jet's intelligence system, everyone was stunned. Is this fighter jet malfunctioning? Song Guoming thought to himself but dared not voice it. Because this fighter jet had already brought them far too many incredulous moments. What if this fighter jet could truly shake off this threat? That would mean he wouldn't need to contact other missile bases. After all, his proposed course of action carried significant risks. It might even lead to a blunder. For instance, a lack of coordination. Failing to intercept the Red Shield CJ-9 but instead shooting down the 6th-generation fighter. That would be a tragedy with no one to blame. Hope there won't be any problems. Song Guoming mused inwardly. Just then the intelligence system's voice echoed again from the communication device. Missile speed Mach 10. Distance from fighter 500 kilometers. Calculating threat level. Calculation successful. The threat level of this missile is 1. Hearing this, Song Guoming quickly glanced at the screen beside him. The data displayed on it showed the Red Shield missile's current speed was exactly Mach 10. And the distance from the fighter was precisely 500 kilometers. Not a single discrepancy. So precise. Song Guoming was taken aback. Even the two national scholars beside him and the members of the research team were somewhat astonished. Since the fighter jet calculated so accurately, did that mean its assessment of the threat level was also correct? Threat level of 1. A member of the research team pondered, then ventured, does this one represent a level 1 threat? Hearing this, everyone nodded. They then began to mentally gauge the severity of this level 1 threat. According to the traditional rabbit calculation method, 1 usually indicated the greatest threat. Conversely, level 2, level 3 were all far better than level 1. If that's truly the case, Li Dao frowned deeply. Doesn't that mean this fighter jet hasn't actually escaped danger? These words plunged the crowd, who had just begun to kindle a sliver of hope, back into silence. Just then Chen Yiming's voice suddenly rang out. That's right, this one is indeed a level 1 threat. However, Chen Yiming glanced at the screen, a peculiar expression on his face. The fighter's display shows the maximum threat level is 1000. These words struck like a thunderous wave. On the observation deck, everyone was dumbfounded by Chen Yiming's statement. What on earth? The maximum danger level is 1000. And the current danger level is only 1. How is that any different from being completely safe? As everyone was pondering this, the system prompt sounded again. Missile speed Mach 13. Distance from fighter 350 kilometers. Calculating threat level. Calculation successful. The threat level of this missile is 1. Hearing this, everyone was rendered speechless. What was wrong with this system? The threat level hadn't even changed. The missile speed had increased by Mach 3. And the distance to the fighter had shrunk to just 350 kilometers. That was a reduction of nearly a quarter. Yet even so, the system still calculated the threat level as 1. Was it certain this system wasn't malfunctioning? Song Guoming was even tempted to demand Chen Yiming whether he had misread it. The maximum threat level must just be 1. Hearing the system's voice, Chen Yiming, who had initially breathed a sigh of relief, suddenly became tense as well. Indeed, when he heard the system prompt, he too had subconsciously thought this damn system must be broken, right? Political Commissar. The missile is getting closer and closer to me. What should I do? Somewhat at a loss, Chen Yiming began to panic. Although he was a pilot in this era of peace, he had never participated in actual combat. Most importantly, the missile chasing him now was the rabbit's most technologically advanced one. It was well known that the rabbit relying on this missile had deterred many nations coveting its territory. With a speed of Mach 20, even the world's most advanced fighter jets dared not face this missile head-on. Furthermore, with such an astonishing speed, even if the rabbit launched it directly at another country, their missile interception systems would struggle to effectively stop it. Not to mention the missile's power, equivalent to an unfathomable amount of TNT. If he were actually hit, there would be only one outcome: utter annihilation. After all, he was currently at an altitude of 18000 meters. Even if only one wing was damaged by the blast, falling from that height would make survival absolutely impossible. So faced with this situation, Chen Yiming couldn't help but panic. Hearing his plea for help, Song Guoming on the other end quickly calmed down and reminded him, Yiming, the only option now is to eject from the fighter as quickly as possible. At Chen Yiming's current altitude, even ejecting the cockpit wouldn't be safe. After all, it was an altitude of nearly 20000 meters. But the problem was, if he didn't separate the cockpit, his only fate was to be caught by the missile and killed. Separating the cockpit offered at least a slim chance of survival. It was still better than sitting in the cockpit waiting for the missile to arrive. Hearing this suggestion, the two national scholars and the research team members showed pained expressions. But considering that ejecting the cockpit might at least save the pilot's life, they said nothing more. Inside the cockpit, Chen Yiming began searching frantically. But as he searched, a sense of despair crept in. Political Commissar. His voice began to tremble. I can't find the cockpit separation button. What? Song Guoming was stunned. He hadn't expected such an advanced fighter jet to lack cockpit separation. Had the designer overlooked it? Song Guoming was dumbfounded. Without cockpit separation, Chen Yiming couldn't escape the fighter. He could only wait for the missile to arrive. Panic seized everyone. At this rate, nothing could be saved. Just then, the fighter jet prompted again. Threat level increased. Fighter commencing acceleration. Hearing this, everyone was frozen in place. Li Deo turned to look at the screen beside him. It showed the fighter's current speed had reached Mach 12. Already at Mach 12, could it still accelerate further? Everyone was utterly bewildered. Just then Chen Yiming's voice rang out. The fighter was just cruising at low speed. Now, it's switching to high-speed cruise. Hearing this, everyone exchanged bewildered glances. They had initially thought the system was malfunctioning, lumping all speeds into a single cruise mode. But now, Mach 12 seemed far from being this fighter jet's limit. While the crowd was astonished that Mach 12 was far from the fighter jet's limit in the cockpit at the same time, Chen Yiming was also somewhat tense. After all, the rabbit's Red Shield CJ-9 missile was now less than 300 kilometers away from him. If it caught up, he would surely be blown to pieces. This is the last gamble. Chen Yiming felt nervous, even his palms sweating. Gripping the control stick with both hands, he gritted his teeth and began to push it forward. A strong sense of resistance came from his hands, but Chen Yiming could clearly feel the stick moving forward. The next moment, an intense thrust pushed him back. Fighter jet entering high-speed cruise mode. Releasing pressure device adjusting. Adjustment complete. Chen Yiming felt his body lighten, and the strange sensation that had just arisen vanished instantly. He looked at the screen, and the next second he was utterly stunned. On the screen, the number representing speed was climbing rapidly. Political Commissar Song Yiming has indeed activated the high-speed mode. At the observation platform, a staff member suddenly spoke out. Pointing at the numbers on the screen, he said with disbelief, his fighter jet speed is now skyrocketing. Hearing this, the stunned crowd immediately snapped out of it. They rushed over and stared intently at the large screen. The staff member began to explain, pointing at a small red dot in the back. This red dot is the Red Shield CJ-9 missile. Its speed has now reached Mach 15. At these words, everyone's hearts tightened. How much time had passed? Had a minute even gone by? The speed had increased from Mach 13 to Mach 15. Though the number seemed small, 1 Mach equals the speed of sound. An increase of 2 Mach meant a boost of nearly 2,500 kilometers per hour. How could this not be shocking? If it were any other fighter jet, it would have been blown up countless times by this Red Shield missile by now. Li Dao said slowly upon hearing the number. Ordinary fighter jets reaching Mach 2 or Mach 3 was already impressive. Double-digit speeds could obliterate those seemingly high-value jets in an instant. But what stunned them most was the 6th-generation jet Chen Yiming was piloting. Despite being chased by a Red Shield missile exceeding Mach 15, it was still able to maintain communication with them. What's the speed of the 6th-gen jet now? Li Dao asked urgently. A staff member glanced at the screen. Swallowing hard, he said hoarsely, the 6th-gen jet speed has now reached Mach 17. The main thing is, the speed increase wasn't smooth, it jumped up instantly. At these words, the crowd who had been excitedly watching the screen was dumbfounded. How? How much? Song Guoming stammered, stunned. Without waiting for the staff's reply, he rushed to the screen and quickly found the current speed of the 6th-gen jet. Mach 17. No mistake. Opening the speed growth curve chart just a few seconds earlier, the jet had been maintaining Mach 13. Then, in an instant, without any warning, the speed abruptly surged to Mach 17. Song Guoming felt the chart could no longer be called a curve, because the line representing the jet speed shot straight up, looking as straight as a rod on the chart. Scholarly this. Song Guoming felt the chart had reached beyond his knowledge. He quickly looked at the 2 national scholars beside him. But he found that Li Dao, Zhao Kangping, and even the entire research team all wore the same expression. Utterly flabbergasted. How? How is this possible? Li Dao murmured, his eyes full of disbelief. As the director of the Aerospace Research Institute, he had delved into engine dynamics for years. In his understanding, any propulsion device would have a smooth acceleration curve during startup, because any device requires a considerable preparation time. Yet the 6th-gen jet could jump from Mach 13 to Mach 17 in an instant. There's only one explanation, Li Dao said hoarsely, uttering words he himself could hardly believe that Mach 17 is far from this fighter jet's maximum speed. At these words, everyone mentally rejected the idea. Mach 17 and not the limit. How could that be? Before they could refute, the equipment changed again. The missile has reached its limit speed of Mach 20. And the 6th-gen jet speed has also increased to Mach 20. The staff member explained the situation with difficulty. The surrounding crowd was thunderstruck. They could no longer comprehend the scene. Mach 20. That was 20 times the speed of sound. How was this possible? Though it's hard to understand, Chi Wei's voice came through the communicator. I still have to say, even though the jet has reached Mach 20, the crisis isn't over. The only way to shake off the missile is to deplete its propulsion module's fuel. That means the jet must fly at least 7,000 kilometers. Hearing this, the crowd realized they had celebrated too soon. 7,000 kilometers at such extreme speed would cause fuel consumption to multiply. Typical fighter jets had a range of about 1,000 kilometers. Meanwhile, Chen Yiming also heard the discussion. After thinking, he spoke. Political Commissar Scholar Zhao. I plan to switch the jet to extreme speed mode. Hearing this, Li Dao and Zhao Kangping, who had been feeling regret, were instantly shocked. It had already reached Mach 20. And it could still accelerate. Was the jet's engine really like the manual said, using a nuclear fission reactor? Though they didn't understand. Since Chen Yiming had said it, this was their last hope. Song Guoming quickly said, then switch to extreme speed mode. All right. Chen Yiming nodded. He pushed the control stick forward again, all the way down. The next moment, he felt the entire jet transforming. Countless holes appeared on the originally smooth fuselage surface. Air rushed through them with a whistling sound. At the jet's tail, several hidden nozzles also extended. Lined up, they spewed scorching flames. The 6th-gen jet's appearance was no longer as sleek as before, but instead exuded a ferocious aura. It was like a beast that had been feeding slowly, suddenly baring its claws and fangs upon spotting prey. Correspondingly, the jet speed began to surge wildly. Entering extreme speed mode, current fighter jet speed Mach 22. Entering extreme speed mode, current fighter jet speed Mach 27. Entering extreme speed mode, current fighter jet speed Mach 30. Already. Mach 30. At the observation platform watching the rapidly accelerating red dot on the screen, the two national scholars and everyone present were dumbfounded. This speed is almost catching up to a rocket, Song Guoming said hoarsely. Then Chen Yiming's voice rang out. After reaching Mach 30 he felt much more relaxed. He even joked lightly, I thought this red shield was impressive, but it doesn't seem like much now. Listening to Chen Yiming's words, everyone was speechless. Wasn't it him who had been so terrified by the red shield missile that he couldn't speak properly? Now that the fighter jet had picked up speed, he was putting on airs. Yet what astonished them most was the fighter jet's velocity. Mach 30. Far exceeding the red shield's Mach 10. At this speed there was no need to fly 7,000 kilometers. All they had to do was widen the distance, causing the red shield missile to lose its target. Then the sixth-generation aircraft would naturally be preserved. Thinking this, Li Dayou and Zhao Kangping's expressions brightened considerably. Smiles even crept onto their lips. They had originally believed the sixth-generation aircraft was doomed. But, unexpectedly, it had been preserved. This was an unexpected delight. With this in mind, they couldn't help but begin to anticipate. They even started planning the disassembly process in their minds, determined to thoroughly study this fighter jet in the shortest possible time. Then at the next International Air Show, they would show those foreign forces who truly reigned supreme. Just as they were lost in thought, suddenly Song Guoming spoke up from the side. Chen Yiming began decelerating. These words instantly stunned everyone around. Hearing this, Chen Yiming was also taken aback. Political commissar, I was just joking. Upon hearing Song Guoming's words, Chen Yiming instinctively thought Song was displeased with his mockery of the red shield missile and quickly explained. But before he could finish, Song Guoming said with utmost seriousness, I am not joking with you. Chen Yiming felt like crying but had no tears. Yet, a military order was a mountain. Since Song Guoming had given the order, even if he didn't understand, he had to obey. Just then, Song Guoming explained, you haven't noticed, but the red shield missile is currently over a city. According to its operating program, if it loses its target, it won't return to its origin nor automatically crash. To prevent our missile from being studied by the enemy, we have set a program in its operation. Once it loses its target, it initiates a self-destruct sequence. And right now the red shield missile is over a city. If it self-destructs, the consequences would be disastrous. Hearing this, Chen Yiming finally understood. He quickly reduced the speed. After the fighter jet's velocity had increased to Mach 30, it had soon put some distance between itself and the red shield missile. He didn't know how far the missile needed to be to lose its target. But if he didn't decelerate, the red shield missile would likely initiate its self-destruct sequence soon. Weighing the safety of a city, if he had to choose, Chen Yiming would rather be the one to collide with the missile. Soon the speed was reduced to Mach 20. Meanwhile, the people on the observation platform also realized the gravity of the situation. Is the only option to fly the 7,000 kilometers? A member of the research team asked, his face ashen. The hope that had barely emerged was extinguished so quickly. But Li Dayou shook his head. The situation is not as dire as we imagine. At these words, everyone immediately looked at him. Then Li Dayou took out his phone and opened a map. Look, Chen Yiming is at this position, right? Everyone nodded. Then they saw Li Dayou swipe right and a stretch of azure appeared on the screen. A few hundred kilometers away is the sea. A missile exploding over a city would endanger civilians. But what if it explodes over the ocean? At this, everyone immediately caught on. Exactly. There was nothing over the sea. If Chen Yiming led the missile to the ocean and then shook it off, wouldn't that have no adverse effects? Realizing this, the dispirited group's eyes lit up with hope. Song Guoming also reacted and quickly said, Yiming, immediately guide the missile to the nearest sea area. Then activate maximum speed mode and detonate the missile over the ocean. Hearing this, Chen Yiming immediately replied, yes sir. Having been somewhat disheartened, he now immediately began adjusting the navigation targeting the nearest sea area. He even reduced the fighter jet's speed further. He maintained a distance of about 300 kilometers between the missile and himself, then changed course and flew toward the nearest sea area. Seeing the little red dot representing the sixth-generation aircraft on the screen successfully change course and maintain a distance of roughly 300 kilometers from the missile, Song Guoming breathed a sigh of relief. However, this matter was far from over. Remember, there was a naval base in the rabbit's waters. I need to notify them immediately to avoid any more blunders. Song Guoming thought, urgently dialing the person in charge of the nearby naval base. At that moment at the naval base, the person in charge was observing the situation in the nearest waters. Just then the phone rang. Political Commissar Song from the southern military region. The person in charge was momentarily stunned. Although he didn't know why Song was calling when people of their rank contacted each other, it was bound to be something significant. Could it be that neighboring countries had made a move? Thinking this, the person in charge quickly answered the phone. Before he could speak, he heard Song Guoming's urgent voice. "We have a fighter jet flying toward your area. Please take measures." A fighter jet. The person in charge was taken aback. Was this such a big deal? Couldn't it just be logged? Was it worth a phone call? Before he could ask, Song Guoming continued, "A missile, the Red Shield CJ-9, is following the fighter jet. The fighter jet is locked onto by the missile and needs to detonate it over the sea. Please take immediate measures to minimize losses." Hearing Song Guoming's words, the person in charge was momentarily speechless. A fighter jet. A missile. And the Red Shield CJ-9 at that. Just then a message arrived from the Naval Radar Department. "Reporting, sir. Our radar has detected a fighter jet approaching at high speed Mach 20. And behind this fighter jet a missile is following. Please advise." Hearing the report from the radar department, the naval commander was dumbfounded. There really was a missile. And what the hell was Mach 20? Had fighter jets already reached this level of development? Remember, this information must not be leaked. This is the rabbit's highest state secret. Song Guoming warned. Understood. The naval commander quickly acknowledged. He hung up and urgently began making arrangements. "Notify all patrol aircraft in the area to take evasive action. A fighter jet is heading our way. Do not intercept. Stay far away because behind this fighter jet, a missile is following." Soon his message reached all pilots. At that moment a pilot patrolling the sea received the order from his superior. Before he could respond, he saw a fighter jet flying at Mach 20. It was so fast it left a series of after images. And behind this fighter jet, a missile was clearly following. What is this? Gazing at the unfamiliar fighter jet that streaked past from the side, its form barely a blur, followed closely by a missile trailing behind it. The pilots at the naval base were instantly dumbfounded. Dong Yao, did you see that fighter jet just now? What model is it and how is it so fast?" A pilot spoke into the communication channel as he hastily veered away. "I didn't get a clear look. It was too fast. I didn't even register it before it was gone, vanishing from my fighter's radar scan range in an instant. Like a ghost. And that missile behind it. I heard the commander say it might be Red Shield." The pilot of the patrol aircraft immediately began discussing it on the communication channel. "That's right, the Red Shield CJ-9. Its top speed can reach Mach 20. It's incredibly powerful. Mach 20. But I saw that fighter jet toying with it. Does that mean that fighter jet speed also reached Mach 20? How is that possible? Could it be the latest model from the Air Force? This is too outrageous. This is the first time I've heard of a fighter jet that can match a missile in speed." At the naval base, all the pilots were in awe. This scene was simply too bizarre. A fighter jet exceeding Mach 20. Unheard of. However, they dared not delve deeper into the discussion. The commander had personally instructed them. What had just happened was a matter of national secrecy. They were told to keep their mouths shut tight. Anyone who leaked the information would be facing a court-martial. Meanwhile, inside the cockpit, Chen Yiming gripped the control stick, steering the fighter jet towards the empty sea area while beginning to accelerate. In a place unseen by anyone, the sixth-generation Skyward fighter entered its extreme speed mode once again. The claws that had just retracted were bared anew. Several air tunnels appeared on the fuselage. The tail nozzles had even multiplied from 4 to 8. All simultaneously spewing searing flames. Current mode, extreme speed mode. Current fighter speed Mach 22. Current fighter speed Mach 25. Current fighter speed Mach 28. Under Chen Yiming's control, the fighter jet speed began to skyrocket. The missile, which had been maintaining a steady 300-kilometer distance, was gradually left behind, disappearing from sight. Finally, with a thunderous roar, it exploded over the sea. By then, Chen Yiming had already pushed the fighter's speed to a much higher level. Looking down from above, a blazing ball of fire blossomed in midair. The tranquil sea surface under the force of the impact was even blasted into a crater. Instantly turbulent waves surged. A vast expanse of the sea began to churn. Seeing this, Chen Yiming finally breathed a sigh of relief, his heart still pounding. That power. If it had scored a direct hit, forget a fighter jet, even an aircraft carrier would be crippled. Meanwhile, the people far away in the city also faintly heard the sound of the missile explosion. Political Commissar, the missile has exploded, a staff member announced. Everyone looked at the screen beside them, seeing that the red dot which had been tailing the 6th-generation fighter had vanished. The naval commander also called. Song Guoming answered, exchanging a few brief words with the other party before hanging up. His furrowed brow finally relaxed. The crisis is over. Thank you all for your hard work. Upon hearing this, the hearts of everyone which had been in their throats finally settled. Hey, this had nothing to do with us. Li Dao said with a wry smile. We didn't help at all. If it weren't for the extraordinary performance of this fighter jet, we would have been powerless. Indeed, I never thought there would come a time when us two old fogies couldn't even get a word in edgewise on aerospace matters. Zhao Kongping also chimed in with a smile. Yet neither man showed any chagrin. As long as they could build a 6th-generation fighter for the nation, regardless of who took the credit, it was a good thing for them. I never imagined this fighter could achieve a top speed of Mach 30. I really thought we were done for this time. I suppose Chen Yiming surviving this time is entirely thanks to this fighter. Surpassing the top speed of the Red Shield missile. I'm starting to get curious about what this fighter's engine is made of. The research team members buzzed with discussion. Every single one of them had intense anticipation in their eyes. Now that the crisis was resolved, it meant they could finally begin researching this fighter jet. Song Guoming, understanding the sentiment, spoke into the communicator. Yiming, the crisis is over. You can return to the Southern Theater Command now. I've notified them. There won't be any further issues. Just fly over safely. Yes, sir. Inside the cockpit, Chen Yiming replied loudly. The crisis had passed, but recalling the massive explosion still sent a surge of adrenaline through him. He reset the navigation to the Southern Theater Command. The fighter jet high in the sky changed direction and executed a dive. Descending to a suitable altitude, it pulled up sharply. The entire maneuver was flawlessly smooth. This is much easier to fly than the old J-10, Chen Yiming remarked sincerely. He pushed the throttle to the max, maintaining Mach 30 as he sped towards the Southern Theater Command. At that moment, having heard the tremendous explosion, the pilots at the naval base were wide-eyed. Before they could even complain on the communication channel, they then saw a strangely shaped fighter jet in the distance flying towards them at an incredible speed. Attention, attention. Something is flying in from due east. It just flew right past me. So fast I can't even make it out. It must be that fighter from before. Why does it seem even faster than before? Impossible, that fighter was already going Mach 20. How could it have increased? Look at your radar. A shout rang out on the communication channel. The pilots hurriedly looked at their radar screens. A small red dot was moving rapidly across it. And beside it, the real-time speed of this red dot was displayed. Mach 30. Seeing this, every pilot was stunned. Mach 30. My radar must be malfunctioning. Mine is showing Mach 32. What's going on? They can't all be broken. There's a fighter jet now that can reach Mach 30. That's comparable to a rocket. Everyone keep quiet. This information must not be leaked. This could be our nation's latest great power asset. Chen Yiming maintained his extreme speed and soon landed the fighter jet at the Southern Theater Command. Song Guoming had given prior notice, so the journey was unimpeded. All patrol fighters voluntarily gave way. About an hour later, Song Guoming, Li Dao, Zhao Kongping and the research team members also arrived by bus. As the door opened, two elderly men were the first to step off the bus. Li Dao and Zhao Kongping, showing no signs of their age, moved with astonishing speed, almost jogging towards the fighter jet parked in the square. Gazing at the sleek, technologically stunning fighter jet before them, Li Dao and Zhao Kongping were overcome with emotion, unable to resist reaching out to touch it. Feeling the solid texture under their palms, the two esteemed scientists wept with joy. Finally, in their lifetimes, they had laid eyes on this fighter jet. Old Li, do you see it? I see it. The two men stood in silence, gazing at the fighter jet for a long time. It took a while for them to compose themselves. Zhao Kongping spoke. Old Li, get in touch with Lin Zipu immediately. Ask him if this thing came from their research institute. In their eyes, the only entity in the nation with the capability to produce the fighter before them was the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation's 601 Research Institute. Meanwhile, at the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation's 601 Research Institute, in the conference room, Lin Zipu, seated at the head of the table, addressed the research team before him. Up to now, our research on the 6th generation fighter has been ongoing for 13 years. For these 13 years, everyone has worked day and night. It has been very arduous. Your efforts have not been in vain. As of now, we have made significant breakthroughs in the development of the 6th generation fighter. At this rate, we estimate that in another 2 or 3 years we can build the world's first 6th generation fighter. In the days ahead, let us continue to work hard and strive for the nation's aviation industry. As Lin Zipu finished speaking, the conference room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Everyone's face was alight with excitement. The thought of contributing immensely to the nation's aerospace industry thrilled them all. Just then a knock suddenly came at the conference room door. Shortly after, Lin Zipu's assistant entered. Senior Lin elderly called. He has something about the 6th generation fighter he wants to ask you. Lin Zipu was bewildered. The 6th generation fighter. They had just made a breakthrough and now someone was calling to ask about it. How did they know? Perhaps I overthought it. Lin Zipu mused to himself. Though they belonged to different research institutes, their shared goal was the advancement of the nation's aerospace endeavors. Moreover, their collective objective was the 6th generation fighter jet. Hence, in the preceding period, Lin Zipu had engaged in numerous discussions with Li Dayou and Zhao Kongping. From conceptual frameworks to design philosophies. Yet when it came to the core technologies, they tacitly withheld details given their affiliation with separate institutes. Betraying the painstaking efforts of their researchers was unthinkable. However, just as his team made a breakthrough, Li Dayou's call stirred an uneasy flutter in his heart. Raising a hand to signal the others to wait, Lin Zipu swiftly returned to his office and answered the call. Hey old Li, I'm in a meeting. What's up? Lin Zipu, have you made a breakthrough on the 6th generation fighter jet? Hearing this, Lin Zipu's heart sank. How long had it been? He had only just announced it. And you already know. Lin Zipu had planned to release the news only when the fighter jet entered production. But he already knew. Lin Zipu was bewildered. After a moment, he regained his composure and demanded over the phone, how did you find out? I saw it with my own eyes. At that moment in the Southern Theater Command, Li Dayou rolled his eyes at the 6th generation fighter jet before him. He thought, this guy really loves to put on an act. He's already delivered the 6th generation jet and he's pretending to know nothing. Upon hearing Li Dayou's words, Lin Zipu was equally dumbfounded. Saw it with his own eyes. From where? His mind felt clouded with confusion. Gradually realization dawned. Had Li Dayou planted a mole in his team? The thought sparked a surge of anger within him. Though there was an undercurrent of rivalry, its purpose was merely to fuel the research impetus of both departments. Once the 6th generation fighter was truly developed, the blueprints and data would be shared across all institutes, for they were all striving for the nation's aerospace glory. But it never crossed his mind that to outpace him in the research race, Li Dayou would resort to planting a spy in his midst. At this thought, he couldn't help but rage. Li Dayou, you old scoundrel, have you no shame? Using such despicable tactics to get ahead in the 6th gen project. I tell you, no matter what you do, our institute will develop the 6th generation fighter before yours. On the other end, suddenly berated Li Dayou was stunned. What the hell? Why are you cursing me? You're the one showing off in my face. And you're the one getting angry. Li Dayou quick-tempered himself, engaged in a heated argument with Lin Zipu over the phone. Watching these two esteemed national scholars bicker without restraint, the onlookers' expressions grew increasingly odd. After about 10 minutes, both men grew weary of the quarrel. Li Dayou took a sip of water and said irritably, stop playing coy with me. I'm standing right next to the 6th generation fighter right now. What? Hearing this, Lin Zipu laughed in disbelief. Fine. I've just had a technical breakthrough, but we're far from building the actual jet. And you're standing next to one. Without further ado, Lin Zipu said, open a video call. If you're really next to a 6th gen fighter, show me. In his view, Li Dayou was simply looking for trouble. Standing next to a 6th gen fighter. What a joke. Has a 6th gen fighter even been built for you to stand by? But just as he thought this, a video call request from Li Dayou suddenly came through. He actually dared to call. Lin Zipu was taken aback, then answered. On his phone screen, he saw Li Dayou with a furious expression. Still being stubborn, huh? Take a look at this. Li Dao snorted and turned the phone camera. The image stuttered for a moment. The next second a fighter jet of a very familiar design appeared before him. Seeing this, Lin Zipu was stunned. He quickly pulled out the concept art of the 6th-generation fighter, comparing it with the jet on the screen. An exact match. What was going on? Lin Zipu was frozen in shock. No, there's no way a 6th-generation fighter could have been built already. It must be a model. Wait, isn't the Southern Theater Command hosting an air show? This old fox. Is he trying to fool me? Lin Zipu thought, his initial shock subsiding somewhat. Oldly, I know how obsessed you are with the 6th-generation fighter. I also know you want to be the first in the nation to invent it. But using a model to trick me, that's a bit underhanded, isn't it? Let alone our country, across the entire planet, is there any nation that can build a 6th-generation fighter now? Your lie is rather crude. You call this a model? Hearing this, Li Dao was utterly exasperated. He had personally witnessed this fighter jet take off vertically at Mach 3 and then outrun the Red Shield missile at Mach 30. And now you're telling me it's a model? If anyone has a model that impressive, give me a dozen. As he fumed, Li Dao gradually came to his senses. Wait. Judging by Lin Zipa's attitude, this fighter jet wasn't built by his team either. Then who made it? Li Dao was puzzled. Seeing his earnest expression, Lin Zipu was equally confused. Oldly, what's going on? Li Dao briefly explained the recent events. He recounted how the fighter jet had taken off vertically, been locked onto by the Red Shield missile mid-flight, and then accelerated to an extreme speed to shake it off. As he listened, Lin Zipu grew more bewildered. Really? He found it hard to believe. Based on his own research, even if a 6th-generation fighter were built now, it couldn't achieve the feats Li Dao described. Mach 30. Are you sure that's not a rocket? Yet seeing Li Dao's serious demeanor, he didn't seem to be lying. Are you at the Southern Theater Command now? Lin Zipu asked. After confirming the location, he wasted no more time. Turning to his assistant, he instructed Xiao Li, arrange the fastest trip to Xiang City for me. I need to go to Xiang City now. Lin Zipu was filled with urgency. He had to see for himself whether Li Dao was telling the truth. Was that fighter jet a real 6th-generation aircraft or just a model?